In June of 2014, Amazon proudly declared they were going to shake up the smartphone market. Look out, Apple, on your guard, Samsung. John Romero's Fire Phone is coming to rock your worlds. There's a chance some of you have not heard of this phone because only 14 months later, in August of 15, they admitted defeat and discontinued it. This launch failed in basically every way imaginable, and it revealed the hubris that can develop in a huge company like Amazon, thinking they could simply link it with their existing services and will everyone to adopt it. The 3D picture thing, it was a little more than a gimmick. They overpriced it, they reinvented an OS that didn't need to be reinvented, they had features no one gave a crap about, like Firefly. Amazon either didn't understand or just didn't care what their customers wanted, and they were left with a miserable failure. They said they had a game changer for an established market with established expectations, and then proceeded to deliver the same thing as everyone else, but executed more poorly. You know, some say history doesn't exactly repeat, but it sure does rhyme. And only 1 month after its final episode, Disney announced they were canceling season 2 of The Acolyte. Oh, I'm sorry, they didn't actually cancel it, they just didn't renew it, because that sounds better. It's a 4-letter word starting with C for trying to deal with bad news. This show is a massive failure by an enormous company that doesn't seem to understand or care what their audience wants, arrogantly thinking they could slap a familiar name on it and will their customers to want it. It's overpriced and underserving. The selling point of a murder mystery was a gimmick that didn't last beyond the first day. They tried to reinvent multiple aspects that didn't need it. It boasts features nobody cares about. In an established universe where the audience already has familiarity and expectations, The Acolyte was said to be a game changer, and then proceeded to deliver the same thing as everyone else, but executed more poorly. Like many others, I had a fun time roasting this show as it came out, making jokes, sometimes out of nothing, because much of the show is so boring it becomes difficult to even mock it. But I knew for a season wrap-up, I wanted to take a much more analytical approach and dig into the writing mistakes, the storytelling stuff that every show is supposed to do, and give some examples of how it was failing in those areas, instead of simply saying, "No sir, I don't like it." This was gonna be one big video about the writing problems, and then how the moral ambiguity theme was handled childishly. And then interviews started coming in from the show creator, Leslye Headland, explaining how she wrote the show and how she sees the themes and the imagery. So a third section was added about how Leslye is a depraved psychopath, which I don't say flippantly, she literally doesn't understand morality. However, as the writing sins began to pile up, I realized I could never cover it all in one video. So today, we are only going to focus on the technical, the mechanics of what makes a story and a show. We will cover all other moral and political issues in part 2. Everything I'm about to talk about is simply looking at the show as a show, as an entertainment product. Does it do what it said it would?
No.
Does it succeed in the way any television show is supposed to succeed?
No, man.
Is there a single aspect that is defensible?
Shit, no, man.
This show is a failure in every single way a show can be a failure. The sheer scope of it, especially in light of this being a production from one of the largest entertainment entities in existence, is frankly stunning. It's also stunning that I haven't asked you yet, in honor of our collective win, to cancel that like button. To fully understand the issues with the show, you have to see where the showrunner's head is at. After episode 7, Leslye gave an interview with The Nerdist, which we're going to be referencing quite a bit because it's extremely telling. The very first question is, how did a virgin become such a big part of the story? Great question, and Leslie's answer tells you pretty much everything you need to know about the show. She made it up because she needed a good reason for everyone to be there. Quote, when we crafted the storyline of this sort of David O. Russell's Three Kings version of the Jedi being stuck on this planet, once we cracked that as a plot point where a lot of other things were going to come from, it felt like the North Star for them had to be something incredibly important. It couldn't just be that they were on a planet on a routine mission. It had to be something that was arduous, a little boring, but ultimately had an endpoint that would establish stakes for any Jedi that came in contact with a Vergence. Okay, first of all, this show has nothing to do with Three Kings. That movie is about a group of guys who want to see the world as morally ambiguous to justify themselves, but in the end, they grow to see that right trumps wrong. Do you see how this woman doesn't understand morality? Anyway, You see how she crafted it. The Vergence doesn't really make much sense, and it causes serious issues with the plot. But that doesn't matter. So much of the show is contrived just for the scene that it's in, and then is forgotten about forever. We needed a reason for the Jedi to be here, and a Vergence is convenient. For those that don't know, I think it's kind of vague, but a Vergence is just a spot where the Force is very concentrated, and it does weird things. It's a plot device, really. As we go through the plot points and dialogue of this show, keep that in mind. The main reason this show feels off is precisely because it's held together with literary duct tape. It's plot and location driven, not character driven. She decided the witches were on Brendock and the Jedi were going to interact with them, and then decided after that on a reason for them to even be there. That is a recurring theme in the whole show. Step 1, this is what we want to see happen. This is the emotional beat we want to fabricate. Step 2, well, what needs to happen suddenly that forces that? What random decision does a character need to make in order to have that thing happen? And can we make it happen with a force power that will never get used again? That would look cool, I bet.
Can you do a 357 with a bayonet?
Yeah, let's see, why not?
In these various interviews, Leslye says a lot of cool things about the show. She had big ambitions. She claims there is so much backstory and meaning and character.
Wow, the land of make-believe.
Yeah, I just wish she had put any of that in the show. Like, watching Leslye describe and defend the show is like watching a kid do a book report on a title they didn't read. Now, according to the reported viewer numbers, a lot of you didn't watch this show. And I just want to say, congratulations, you made the right call. But let's do a brief summary with some names and faces so that you can follow along. 16 years before the show starts, the Jedi are on a planet, Brendock, trying to figure out why life has reappeared after the planet was totally dead due to a space calamity. A 4-person squad, Master Trinity, Master Squid Game, Master Chugi, and Padawambulance, whose only role is to whine and cry. They didn't scan the planet, so they don't see this enormous structure nearby where witches are living and using the Force, but they call it the Thread, but it's literally the same thing, but it won't come up again, so it doesn't matter. There are only 2 kids there, fraternal twins for now, and it seems that they were created, perhaps by the Force thread, and they have no father. The Jedi see the kids and the witches, investigate, and want to take the kids back to be trained as Jedi because Squid Game feels a super strong connection to one of them. A kid spills something and it makes a bigger mess than you ever thought possible, which totally makes sense. A fire breaks out, a fight ensues, all the witches die, and one of the girls seems to as well. 16 years later, the surviving twin Osha is ironically doing unsafe work as a mechanic on trade ships because she is a Jedi school dropout. Master Trinity gets murdered by dead twin May, whose reported death was apparently exaggerated. Because they're identical now, even though they weren't as kids, and they have the same hairstyle, including woven in color, Osha is arrested for the murder by her old Jedi school buddy Yord, aka Timothée Chalamet, and his Padawan, who doesn't matter because she'll never be seen again. Yord is now a Jedi Knight, and proud of it. She is put on a droid-piloted ship. There's a prison break by prisoners who can mentally control droids. She crashes on a snow planet that won't come up again, so the name doesn't matter. Her old teacher Soul, who clearly still thinks about her a lot, comes to get her, along with Timothée and Jeki, or Padawan X-23 as she is sometimes known. May has a mysterious master who is a drama king. In the 16-year time passage, Padawambulance was promoted to Master Terriblebeard. He's so guilty about the stuff on Brendock, he's in a magic Jedi coma trance meditation thing. May does this excellent mime impression and then goes to her buddy Kamir, who is sloppy and goofy and not at all suspicious, to get some poison. She convinces Master Terriblebeard to drink it. Her next target is Master Chugi, and everyone knows it. So they all fly to the forest planet soundstage he lives on because he's been warned through comms that an assassin is coming. But he turned the comms off. In doing so, suddenly his location is somehow gone, or whatever needs to happen for them to need Merch Gopher, who is a sniffer. Not the Wheel of Time kind, or maybe it is. A lot of this show, Bolshevik borrows ideas from all over the place. In a crazy twist that only happens in poorly written shows, everyone shows up at Master Chugi's house at the same time, except May, who had a spat with Kamir, so he's not there. Except he is! In a twist even Stevie Wonder saw coming, Kamir is actually Darth Johnny Cash here. Any name starting with Darth is this guy. It changes a lot, and most of them are referring to these guns, which I'm totally not jealous of. A fight ensues. These red shirts all die, even X-23, and also Yord, thankfully. The girls run off off and they love each other. Sometimes, but the script says not right now. So Osha gets knocked out, her clothes stolen like it's a Hitman game, and May does any of the 3 Barbie animated movies where twins switch places. Take your pick. You got Princess and the Pauper, the Princess Twins of Legendale, or the Princess and the Pop Star. They are technically not twins, but a magic microphone and magic hairbrush allow them to fool everyone. She goes with Soul, and Darth Suddenly Tender takes unconscious Osha back to his cave in a totes platonic way. Then he gets naked in front of her, which starts her path to the dark side. Back on Coruscant, Master Director Spouse has been trying to keep all of this quiet for political reasons. In yet another twist that can only happen in a poorly written show, everyone is back on Brendok where it all started, and they're there at the same time. Soul clumsily admits he killed Osha's mom, which he's been claiming he's going to say for the entire show. Osha kills him and is officially on the dark side. May is now wearing white, so she's not after revenge or anything anymore, and Darth Agent J wipes her memory, which is a thing that can happen now. He and his new girlfriend are a power couple. They are Jack's ripped-off ending scene. Back on Coruscant, Master Director Spouse blames everything on Jedi Soul to take the heat off of the Jedi. Also, Plagueis was there for a second, and so was Yoda. Get excited for next product! Something that you might have noticed is that while the show was pitched as being through the perspective of the bad guys, exploring the dark side, all that, most of the plot revolves around Osha, who isn't bad until the very end. What becomes clear is that no one truly knew what they wanted to make or who it was for. As Leslye admitted, they had a few key elements they decided on beforehand and filled in the rest as they went. The result is some of the worst writing you might have ever seen in a television show. A show that cost $180 million, backed by one of the biggest names in entertainment, and it has plot holes so big a space whale could fly through them. Let's hop in with a gigantic one. No one knew about evil sister May.
I didn't know Osha was a twin.
Twins. Osha has a twin sister.
Her name is May.
After the first murder, Master Director Spouse grills Master Squid Game about it.
Why didn't you tell me about this?
I did, as soon as I knew.
No, Soul. 16 years ago.
We know that Osha failed Jedi school because of her sister.
I could never learn to calm my negative emotions, my hatred of you, my grief. So I never became a Jedi.
But hey, that conversation's in episode 8, and the unknown sister was mentioned way back in episodes 1 and 2. Look, the writers can't be expected to keep this kind of thing straight. This show reminds me of one of those art exhibitions where a few people start drawing on separate canvases, and then every minute they all switch, and in that case, you get a cool piece of art with everyone's input. When it's a TV show, it results in a torn colostomy bag mess when the plot points and character arcs don't fit together. You see, back in episode 1, we were still pretending to be a mystery for a few minutes, even though the mystery was going to be solved immediately for us a few minutes later. That information was only useful for the supposed mystery. We don't need that ever again.
It's unimportant. It won't come up again.
Kind of like Yord's Padawan from episode 1. She doesn't need to be there anymore. She was just filling up the scene. So much of this show is just filling, it's padding. It is useless visual and audio clutter. The temporary plot point of no one knowing Osha had a secret sister is very important because it shows how little these folks thought the whole process through. Osha was in Jedi training for years and eventually flunked out because she couldn't control her hatred and grief. I think the natural question the Jedi Order would ask might be something like, "Why do you feel hatred, child? And toward whom? Your sister? We have no record of a sister." Her buddy Timothy never knew any of this, even though they grew up together.
The whole thing is highly suspect.
But we needed to make our 8-episode essay assignment minimum, and if Osha's file clearly stated that she had a twin, presumed dead, well, at least half the first episode wouldn't need to happen, and it's 70% filler as it is. We can't afford to get rid of anything. If people knew about the twin, the Jedi might have investigated the Witch Planet years ago. Someone probably would have questioned Master Squid Game. They probably would have acted sooner, sending word about the assassin to where Master Terriblebeard was hovering. It's possible they never would have contacted Osha at all, or brought her along on the missions where she could meet Darth Seductus. Basically, the show likely wouldn't have happened because the information we've been given doesn't suggest the cover-up was all that well covered, and the supposed crime wasn't even extremely criminal. But we have plenty of throwaway plot points like that. Osha is a mechanic, which is just such a stupid word. Like, I can't call myself a content creator and pretend that I made up a new word because I dropped a single syllable. Honestly, though, it's par for the course with this writing team. Anyway, Osha is a mechanic, so she knows how to fix ships. Later, in the very same episode where this information is given to us, a ship is an autopilot, and she doesn't resolve the issue. I mean, in fairness, she couldn't access this console because it's on fire. How did a console catch on fire? Just because the pilot drones were overridden? It's on fire, so she can't use it. That's what you need to know. There's a blockage in the road. We're gonna have to go around. Gotta wake up Snorlax before you can proceed.
Huh? Oh, path's blocked. What do you mean? Well, the path is blocked by a fallen tree.
So much of this show runs on video game logic, I swear. So she can't access that console, and this other console is just for show. So she has to strap into this chair. This seatbelt prevents her demise while a ship crash lands from orbit. If you thought the fire was tense, just look at how scared she is because the seatbelt is stuck. Look at how stuck it is! This show costs $180 million, and the prop department seriously couldn't lock that thing. She had to badly pretend it wouldn't move. Guys, I could go to a junkyard right now and get a seatbelt. They auto-lock when you pull them too hard. Like, just nobody cared about this show, right down to the set crew. Oh, and those tanks that she threw out of the seat, definitely not going to bounce around and crush her skull. This entire sequence is just manufactured tension that goes absolutely nowhere. And what's the real point? I mean, Yord put her on a prison transport to Coruscant, where Sol is. But then there is a prison break, because the guy who can control droids with his mind is put on a prison transport run entirely by droids. Okay, we have the whole ship escape. This guy who has a Typhon mimic on his mouth is here. We've got that whole thing. Sol using the Force to calm a guy's mind and give him information, which is a handy power he never uses ever again. That happens as a result of the prison ship. This little chase through the ice planet cave and Sol grabbing Osha with the Force. Literally half of the first episode is a result of Osha being put on the prison transport. I cut all the segments of the episode that only happened because they put a suspect in the murder of a Jedi Master on an unmanned prison transport. It is 14.25 minutes of the episode. And what do we learn from it? What character traits are revealed about anyone? Sol is worried about Osha. Well, no, we already saw that. It gets Osha to Sol? No, she was already heading to him. This didn't need to happen. The only purpose it serves is to inform Osha and the audience that there is a twin through a vision, which we pretty much all guessed instantly when Osha woke up and was having an extremely natural conversation with her coworker about where she was last night. That also could have happened anywhere. The snow planet, which is Karlak, holds zero significance. So halfway into the first episode, they solved the supposed murder mystery, but it resulted in over 14 minutes of screen time getting chewed up, and we learn nothing. We accomplish nothing. It is filler. It's a complete waste of time. So much of this show is about rehashing things we already knew to fill space. And it's crazy because there are plenty of unanswered questions and unexplored characters. In these interviews, Leslye and the actors keep bringing up backstory, plot points. They sound super cool. It's just, too bad they were never on screen. Oh, something else that happens in episode 1 that never gets brought up again is the reason for arresting Osha quickly and quietly.
If it were to become public that a former Jedi killed one of our own,
Our political enemies could use it against us.
But at the end of the show, Master Director Spouse pins the whole thing on Sol, a Jedi who is killing their own. The thing she said needed to be dealt with discreetly so their political enemies can't use it against them is said out loud as a defense in front of their political enemies.
Congratulations, you played yourself.
The final cover-up makes no sense. If you're being accused of being a powerful body with no oversight, why would you pin a crime on one of your own? You're proving the senator guy right!
You project an image of goodness and restraint. But it's only a matter of time before one of you snaps.
According to this airtight alibi, Sol couldn't control his emotions and snapped. Just like the senator guy said, if you're a corrupt, giant, powerful organization with basically no oversight and you want to maintain power, You have to have an external threat to justify your power. You have to be at war with Eurasia. If you reveal that you have internal problems, it makes the case for dismantling you even stronger. This is the worst writing. So Sol gets blamed, but everyone knows May is actually the killer, and any question that Sol was secretly training her would be squashed, by him being at the temple all the time, and by Osha being there as well. There is proof that the two girls are indeed separate people, so they can't attempt that Shyamalan twist crap. Multiple witnesses can place May and Osha at different places at the same time, and anyone who speaks Badger can ask this merchandising opportunity to tell them he witnessed a guy dressed in black with a red lightsaber attacking the Jedi, and it wasn't the Asian fellow he walked into the forest with. This is the worst cover-up in the history of cover-ups. A toddler with chocolate all over their face, pretending that they've been asleep when the parents ask aloud, "Who ate all these cupcakes?" is doing a better job evading their crime than Master Director Spouse. Darth Smokescreen did evade his crime in Episode 2 by handing the Jedi a script so they could see that he needed to leave to go grab his scary helmet. After Master Terriblebeard's death, they know he was poisoned and immediately zone in on the only apothecary in town.
Is this the only apothecary in town?
It is.
The Jedi are familiar with the place and the owner.
That's not our regular guy. I don't know who that guy is.
When they send a civilian in to get information, it goes south immediately, and they come in with lethal force at the ready. They want to find May, and they tell this guy that they'll let him go if he gives them information. Then they leave him and stake it out, waiting for her to come back, which results in a confrontation in the street instead of force paralysis and arrest, but whatever. Okay, the show should be done right here in Episode 2. This is it. They arrest the accomplice to a murder, and then when the murderer comes back, they stun gun her in the street and arrest her also. Show is over. When they confront Darth Snape, he admits to being a poison seller and gives the murderer what she needs. So he is an accomplice.
You gotta understand that I don't come up with this stuff. I just forward it along. You wouldn't arrest a guy who's just delivering drugs from one guy to another.
But more than that, he's not the shop owner. And judging from his willingness to brutally murder these Jedi, I think it's safe to assume he killed the owner of the apothecary. Do they arrest him and search for the owner, keeping him for questioning until May is caught? No, he needs to be free so he can do his big reveal, and also so he can take his mask off and let us all know that he was always
the left hand.
No, hang on, that ain't right. That's just... No, okay, he was always
the stranger.
So they allow him to stay in the apothecary and wait for May, and when she shows up, Sol does not arrest her. He has an emotional confrontation in a public place. Brittany, anything you want to tell Sol? Correct. Stop posting your drama online and expressing yourself via cryptic emo lyrics. A fight ensues, and naturally, she gets away because, in a normal world, they would both be in custody. She'd either roll over on him and reveal him, or he would bust out and be revealed. Either way, the show is sunk. Fortunately, everyone was at the table read, so both she and Darth Unassuming get away. The last plot hole to discuss is the biggest one, and oddly enough, features a hole. This one, right here. The witches being here makes zero sense, neither in the show nor in the damage control interviews that Leslye has been doing. In that first question with the Nerdist, where she was explaining how they justified the Jedi presence on the planet after deciding they needed to be stuck there, she explained how the planet works. It's a vergence. It amplifies the witch's power, which she said was weak. Quote, "My backstory to the witches of Brendock and where they are is that Torben mentions it's an old mining company. So I sort of imagine that it's a little bit like John Carpenter's The Thing, right? There are all these miners there. They were drilling. They found something, and then everybody was gone. And the next thing you know, 50, 60, 100 years later, this coven moves in. A couple years after that, the Jedi start to move there. It's almost like a magnet that's pulling these characters toward it. You see what I mean about her saying her show has stuff that isn't there? That's my favorite drinking game in these interviews, is her or other actors who helped her write the show talking about these deep meanings and ideas, and I'm just like, where are they? We are never treated to any of this information in the actual show because the vergence is, well, how did Leslye put it? It's just a cool aspect of Star Wars vocabulary. Well, I mean, she says it's not that, but If you read these interviews, you'll also notice her saying, I think, a lot when talking about her own show and characters. So we needed the witches to be there, and we needed the Jedi to be there, so there is a big Vergence Force thing that draws the Jedi in, yet they can't sense it. It's strong enough to amplify the witch's powers, but not the Jedi powers. The witch powers might be a combination of actual magic, the Force, and some nature stuff. Leslye points to the eclipse happening during the ceremony. They are using, quote, these powerful movements of heavenly bodies and whatever's under the earth. That type of thing. What's under the earth is the Force, the Vergence. You just said it was under there because the miners dug too deep and too greedily, remember? Is that why they gather around this random hole in the ground? Did the mining operation make that? Did they start drilling a random hole in the middle of their own courtyard area on top of their structure, not in the ground where one typically mines? You know what? Don't bother thinking about any of this. No one in the writer's room did. It's just there to look somewhat mystical. No one knows what powers they actually have. That's why it's not in the show. She says the combo of these 3 different powers is what is throwing the Jedi off because they can't pin down what the witches are using. What you see happening here is lazy writing that results in massive plot holes. The Jedi know the Force, and they know what magic is. So where is the great confusion coming from? Now, the Jedi might not suspect magic right away.
A force cult here.
I think they are witches.
I am Anastasia, mother of this coven.
Oh, well, that's a problem. They're definitely witches, and witches use magic, so this is lazy amateur writing. The Vergence being important yet undetectable is a problem that can't be easily solved. It's a plot device masquerading as a plot point that falls in on itself under the slightest inspection. So she acts like it's a mystery and hand waves it all away, but it creates insurmountable issues for Soul's eventual story of why he couldn't admit to his crime of killing a smoke monster. He says without the twins, there was no proof. But if the Vergence is in the planet, not in the girls, then all he needs to do is bring some other Jedi to the abandoned mining site, like do some tests, right? These are major plot points that make 0 sense, and the entire story should not exist because of them, not to mention all the smaller holes we could talk about.
No. Is that enough? Should I keep going?
Let's take a break from that for a minute. Let's talk about these witches, because the scenes with them are hilarious. The ritual scene must have had the craziest directing. First of all, it's very clear that they went to a local community theater and they were like, get in losers, we're making a Star War. So I'm trying to imagine what it must have sounded like to give direction to the Angel City players right here. Yes! Work the thread! Sew it! Knit it! Stitch it! These people are pantomiming sewing, but they've obviously never seen it before. Like, it's only ever been described to them like a Renaissance painter who has never seen the thing that he's painting. Of course I know how to paint a horse. How dare you, sir? I have seen, like, so many. Some of my best friends are horses, I'll have you know. Pretend you're embroidering the sky. Yes, that's it. Yes, now you're fascinated by your own handiwork. Can anyone here think of what Xena Warrior Princess would sound like if she heard a funny joke? More arms! Imagine you're a wacky waving inflatable arm flailing tube man! Yes, that's perfect. Now I want you to warp the woofer. Is that the, what do you call that? Yes, you are excited for the ascension. You're very excited. Okay, now remember the song, just like we practiced.
Power 1, power 2, the power of many.
Oh, yeah, that was it. No, we're good. No, we got it the first time. We don't gotta go again. Like, what is this motion? Seriously, I was chuckling through this whole thing. Honestly, the real direction these people got was look mystical. Or maybe they're gearing up for a face-off of some kind. These witches look like they're having a dance battle with another coven. Or maybe like a cheer battle. Might be having a riff off. Sorry, I couldn't pick one. Hey, quick aside, what was happening in the early 2000s? Why did we have so many rhythm battle movies? You can Stomp the Yard, Step Up, and its 7 sequels. You Got Served, Pitch Perfect, Roll Bounce, Drumline, so many. And it was just an elegant solution for a more civilized time. We solved our problems with
dance, dance, dance.
Yes!
This scene always cracks me up. Like, they're in a warehouse or underground, like it's an illegal dance-off or something. Like, maybe I just don't get dancing, but I never did understand how one guy would look like he was straight up having a seizure, and then they would cut to the opposing team who looked like he just insulted their mothers. This guy has gang tattoos, and he's supposed to be intimidating, but he pop locks in a warehouse on the weekends. Sorry, we were talking about witches, I think. The hilarity continued in episode 7, when the witches all needed to get together, Kumbaya style, to control the Wookiee, but then Master Trinity turns off the Wi-Fi.
Andy's coming, everybody! Back to your places, hurry!
Aside from it being very comedic, I literally LOL'd when it happened. This is just more lazy writing, piled on top of the lazy writing trash pile. We needed to make the Jedi look kinda bad because we're going for moral ambiguity here, but they can't be mass murderers slaughtering like 40 witches and covering it up. But the witches can't survive because there would be evidence of the crime. As a writer, how do you solve this problem?
Okay, that makes sense.
The funniest thing about the witches is that we are supposed to feel anything for them. We are trying to show the Jedi as not as good as you think, but the witches are clearly worse. Here, we see another area where Leslye doesn't seem sure of what she even wants to say, so she tries to be mysterious. The interviewer asks her a great question. Going into this episode, the show definitely suggested that the Jedi might have done something truly terrible on Brendock, but I think this episode showed that all of their actions were either genuinely noble, totally defensible, or at least understandable mistakes. What was the thematic purpose of raising the possibility of hidden Jedi crimes if you were then going to reveal that they were flawed rather than evil? Headland responds, I'm glad it read that way for you. What do you mean, read that way for you? That's what happened. There's no interpretation to read. It's a show about the bad guys, in every sense of that word. And because my previous work before coming into the Star Wars world was almost always concerned with some sort of morality, immorality, or amorality, it was always about characters running through a spectrum of those things, as opposed to having a good character and a bad character, a good girl and a bad girl, a nice guy and a womanizer. That these characters could all be these things at once was so important to me. I'm glad that you got that impression from watching the episode, that the Jedi are not performing evil acts. They're not being willfully oppressive, they're not manipulating or tricking anyone. So if the show, with all the other characters, is exploring the spectrum of morality, The Stranger being a great example, May being a great example, it felt to me that the Jedi also had to have that particular treatment. The Jedi could not be part of that thematic element of the show. Okay, so they didn't do anything wrong, yet we are supposed to sympathize with Osha choking Soul to death. What spectrum of morality are we looking at with the Jedi? They covered up a non-crime that they had no reason to cover up anyway. The events on Brendock are straight up idiot plot, and the episode only happens because everyone is making the worst decisions imaginable because the script says so. This event on Brendock is the thing the Jedi do in the season. If we're going to be showing some kind of moral spectrum, we need to find it here. And Leslye does believe this show is looking at the Order through a different lens. In a Collider interview, she had this to say. The interviewer asks, you mentioned something there that is one of the reasons I love the Acolyte so much, which is the way that Kamir has really picked apart who the Jedi are. It's such a fun response, because the High Republic already kind of laid the groundwork for getting people prepared for thinking of the Jedi as not always the good guys. For you, as a fan of Star Wars, how much fun has it been to get to pick apart these ideas that have been baked into the franchise for so long, and then flip the narrative a little bit and make people look at things from a very different point of view? I'm sorry, what flipping happened? I didn't see any flipping at all. Headland responds, I hope it's making people look at it from a different point of view. I can understand that fans, especially people who don't know the High Republic, may feel like I'm criticizing the Jedi as they exist in George Lucas's oeuvre, meaning the prequels and episodes 5 through 6, but that's not the case. We're so much further back from that. We're in that era that Obi-Wan is talking about in A New Hope. We're in that period where the proliferation of power is so huge and far-reaching. Actually, in the next episode, you're going to see how far-flung particular missions with Jedi are and the lack of oversight. So she's alluding to them doing something wrong. They're acting with no oversight. She wants us to look at them differently, but the only difference I'm seeing is that These Jedi are absolute morons. They are senseless lackwits who make the rashest, wrongest decisions in any given situation. That's not a moral issue, that's an intelligence issue, and it's coming from the writer's room. These are the kind of smug, vague, non-answers that you give if you're trying to cover for not knowing what you're talking about. I mean, really, she's one step away from going, "Let me answer your question with a question." I think she's reading the criticism online and might be realizing that she didn't convey any of the themes she wanted, and is now falling back on a classic artist smokescreen. It's totally up for interpretation, and the fact that everyone reads it different ways is proof that it's deep.
False.
It's proof that you wrote a terrible show that doesn't agree with itself or what you explain about it. Inception had an ambiguous ending on purpose. You get to look at the film, look for clues, and decide for yourself if Cobb is awake or not and why. A lot of people find that fun. It's part of the mystery. When the audience has to do the writing for you in order to fill in the gaps, that's not a mystery. That's a failure. And these answers are what you give to distract when you have no idea what to say.
You know why the Yankees always win, Frank?
Because they have Mickey Mantle?
No. It's because the other teams can't stop staring at those damn pinstripes.
The Jedi are shown to be a bit inept here, but not amoral. The witches, on the other hand, don't look good at all. We have this queer coven kibbutz where only women are there, none of those pesky men to screw things up. A pair of lesbians run the show. Hillary Clinton's village vision is real, and in this fatherless home, there are 2 children being raised. One is an animal abuser with serious rage issues that immediately resorts to violence and arson when things aren't going her way. The other is constantly uncomfortable and leaps at the first opportunity she sees to get away. Going with the Jedi means never seeing my parents again? No problem, where's the ship? If, like, Ben Shapiro portrayed the queer coven kibbutz this way, it would make sense. But it was Leslye who wrote this hilarious own goal. Leslye wrote these women's idea of the Force as the thread. Because they're women? They sew? Are you serious? And how do you finish sewing? Scissors. She's writing these jokes for me! The witches have ceremonies around this hole in the ground, which we already said is pointless, and despite the presence of Osha doesn't have any fall protection, in this show, the lesbians are worshipping at a hole. You can't make this up. What's next? Is Neil Bomer gonna write a story about clandestine gay warlocks whose secret headquarters is under the Washington Monument? Honestly, it seems like maybe they're trying to do edgy humor or something, you know? Like, the women sew and they praise the hole. We've got this funny race humor. This fella, Lee Jung-jae, a Korean actor, is named Soul. Huh? It's hard to tell though, because they only do a couple of the edgy bits. They should have just gone all the way. Like, Yord could have told someone, oh, Yord's a nickname. His full name is like Martin Luther King Boulevard or something.
Yord, put your clothes on.
If they would have done that, we would know if it was a gag or not. Now, accidental plot holes are nothing compared to making up whatever dialogue and actions you need to get to the next predetermined plot point or emotional beat you want to manufacture. But that's what these writers did constantly. The amount of contrivance required to compel this zombie husk of a show to shamble forward is simply astounding. We were just talking about the 2 witch episodes. The contrived actions by the Jedi in those is mind-blowing. First of all, they're investigating this planet because it was dead and now it isn't. They are searching for clues on this entire planet by hand. You got the Wookiee over here with a friggin' metal detector. He's obviously searching for a character arc, plot, themes, something. Best I can do is CW enemies to lovers. You got this kid working a hand grinder, manual pour-over coffee maker here. Honestly, I was feeling bad for that kid, but the pour-over means we can't be friends. That is obnoxious. They're picking up chunks of moss with moss and putting them in a box with lights that change color. Something sciencey happening here, I bet. Is this a parody? Are we doing Spaceballs?
Are we being too literal?
No, you fool. We're following orders. We were told to comb the desert, so we're combing it.
Found anything yet? Nothing yet, sir!
Clearly they didn't do any scans from orbit or any business permit research or anything because they had no idea about the giant mining fortress just a few miles away. In this advanced sci-fi universe, the Jedi are collecting moss by hand and walking around an entire planet with a metal detector. But of course, we already know it's contrived. We saw Leslye admit that they needed to come up with a reason for them to be there after deciding they wanted to do a Three Kings style plot, which they absolutely missed by several miles. They can't scan the planet and find the massive mining structure that can be seen from a mile away because the script needs them to be there for several weeks. Also, these Force-sensitive Jedi can't feel the Vergence while standing on the planet that drew them in like a magnet. It's probably localized to the gigantic mining mountain castle, but the new growth on the planet can't seem to resonate outward from the localized Vergence spot either because, well, that would lead them right to it. Obviously, their only course of action is to collect specimen by hand, so one character can moan about how they've been there for weeks, and another character can stumble across two girls at the same time and place on an entire planet, and then, after these several weeks, they proceed to make rash decisions with zero thought. Like, do you see how absurd this is? All they knew is that the Jedi need to be there, and the girls need to be created, and the same person, and special, somehow, and Master Roman Solansky is pining for a Padawan, and he spots one, he can't get out of his mind. They were just intent on those things being there. The rest is filler. They make it up as they go. Everyone is an idiot. That's the only way the plot moves forward at all. There's a whole trope name for a plot that only works if everyone is an idiot. It's aptly named an idiot plot. And this show might be the best example I've ever seen. Or worst example. You get it. Horror movies where one character goes off alone to investigate the power outage at the outbuilding 100 yards away that has the breaker box in it for some reason. Even that doesn't hold a candle to the outer space bonfire of this show. The Jedi think the girls are in danger because a little kid said,
"Mama said everyone must be sacrificed to fulfill their destiny."
And they didn't ask a child to clarify, did you mean everyone has to sacrifice? Nope. They just charge in, so that way we can call it a misunderstanding and the showrunner can smugly say they're behaving on a spectrum of morality. It's super deep, you might not get it. Padawambulance is super homesick because we needed something to drive the action. Hey, why not that? He's a Jedi, doesn't have a home or attachments, not sure what he's pining for, but...
I'm just sick of eating Nuna legs. And I want to go home to Coruscant.
Well, he said aloud that he wants to go home, so I guess that's that. Sol's whole motivation for getting the girls and getting both is to prove to the Council something same person, Force Vergence, who knows. They have the blood tests, right? Is that not proof? At least enough to get the Council to send more backup? Why does the Council tell them to stand down? Aren't they investigating this planet to find out why it's suddenly full of life? A pair of Force-sensitive twins with identical blood tests whose mother said there is no father. Does it raise any flags? These details are irrelevant. What's important is they needed to act irrational and desperate and physically be at Castle Mining Haven. How they get there is beside the point, really.
Don't you see? We just need proof of a Vergence, and those girls are the proof. This is our ticket home!
We needed to do a twin swap plot, so both twins couldn't make it off the planet. One had to be presumed dead, which is why Sol acts like an idiot and tries to hold up two giant heavy bridges instead of force-pulling two light little girls and saving them both. But the Jedi aren't the only ones who act dumb. During a tense standoff with Jedi, one of whom she already mind-controlled when she had plenty of time to admit to them that one of the girls was going to go with them, the head witch turns into a smoke demon and begins to turn the child into smoke as well. Why does she do the most sinister-looking thing imaginable? Well, so Sol can stab her and the plot can happen. It doesn't make any sense and it doesn't have to. We simply need a twin bent on revenge and another who looks to Sol as a father figure so Leslye can have her therapy session of defeating her dad on screen. Osha can defeat her... No, I'm just kidding. It was the first one. These actions don't make any sense, and it doesn't matter. The last episode is all that mattered, and they were going to drag this plot across the finish line, kicking and screaming if they had to. We had a cover-up. Why? Something, they'll never let Osha be a Jedi otherwise. As we already covered, apparently no one interviewed her or asked about her past or anything. Master Trinity's lie totes covered it all up. Also, the Council never investigated Castle Embermine to see about the Vergence or like what happened with the mission or anything. Forget about that now, viewer. We're shipping Osha and the bad boy. This is what's important now. How we got here is inconsequential. Look, she's hugging her sister. They're crying. You need to feel what we want when we want it. The manufactured tension and emotion is rampant. Take this fire, for example, a key plot point. The building is burning. That's what made May run to her mom, who did the most reasonable thing and turned into a smoke monster so she could get stabbed and have just enough breath left to tell Soul, psych, I was gonna let them go the whole time. We attacked you as a prank, bro. You got punked and you took it too seriously. And then she died. That fire was started because the violent, psychotic, animal-abusing pyromaniac child raised by all women burned her sister's book with an oil lamp and dropped it. The oil spread and lit the entire castle on fire. Perfectly natural. Like, everything about this is goofy. The fortress erupting in flames at different levels, huge explosions from an oil lamp, which looks like it has about a cup of oil in it, yet spreads all over the place. Why does this sci-fi future mining fortress with electric doors and an elevator have oil lamps? Why is there open flame for lighting? Well, obviously, so an oil fire could happen, because the people writing this couldn't be faffed to give it more than 2 minutes of thought. There were no script rewrites, guys. This is the rough draft. Zero critical thought was put into this, just the emotions they wanted to happen. The girls need to be scared. How?
Giant fire.
Great idea. What started the fire?
Oil lamp.
Love it. Anything else could have worked for this. Like, since the witches were using part force, part magic, part nature, whatever, they could have summoned a storm. Right? Then it gets out of control, the fortress gets struck by lightning, starting multiple fires. Here, look, I made a mock-up. This is what it could have looked like. Here's the thing about the fires. Both the stone fortress / metal door erupting in flames and this lazy bonfire in space in episode 1. These things aren't bad because they don't obey the laws of physics. That's seriously not the issue. It's fiction. In every fiction, there is a certain amount of rule bending that looks silly if you zoom in on it and ignore everything else. The issue with these scenes is twofold. One, they are so over-the-top bad that your mind notices them instantly without you having to be looking that hard. That's a big problem when you're just trying to chill and watch a space opera and something happens that is so stupid, your brain can't help but be pulled from the immersion and wonder about the stupid event. The second issue is when nothing else in the scene is remotely compelling enough to allow you to ignore the odd events. Here's a good example. In Ocean's 11, we're pulling off a casino heist. This acrobat goes into this box so he can be rolled into the vault and blow up the doors from the inside. They park his cart in the vault and put a briefcase on top, which is a problem because if he opens the lid and the briefcase slides off, it will trip these laser sensors moving across the floor. We get this scene where he opens the lid, catches the case just in time. Then he has to backflip from the cart to a nearby shelf so he can play the floor is lava toward the door, but the floor is not lava, it's moving trip lasers. Now, if we stop and examine this, it makes no sense. Trip lasers can't sweep a room like this. They have to be connected to a receiver so they know when the beam gets broken. That's how your garage door knows not to close on something or someone in the way. They also are generally invisible, just like your garage. These carts that get rolled into the room would be setting off the sensors because they're blocking the beams. And ultimately, lasers across the floor is kind of silly because a regular motion sensor would make way more sense here. But many of you maybe have never bothered to think about these things until I just brought them up. Why is that? Well, the lasers aren't focused on heavily. They're in the background. They represent only one part of a general risk that if the plan doesn't go perfectly, they'll get caught. Also, lasers in movies are pretty common. We're used to them behaving this way. But the bigger reason is because you are invested in the characters and their goal. At this point in the movie, we have established what a douche the casino owner is and how our roguish yet charming hero is trying to get righteous revenge and win his girl back. We've set up the intricate heist and now it's actually happening. The movie is giving us the payoff. We are invested in this sequence and the sincere tension that is being created. Anything could go wrong at any moment, so you don't notice the odd details about the moving, visible trip lasers. It's not so obviously weird that your brain instantly nudges you while gesturing towards it, mouthing, I mentioned in a previous video that I was so bored during Rebel Moon that I looked up wheat bushel prices to discover that entire fight was over approximately $60,000 worth of wheat. Some people thought I was joking. I wasn't joking. I was that bored and divested from the story, and the whole premise of a giant spaceship that has the ability to hyper jump through space labia, yet needs wheat and can't trade bricks to keep going was so odd, I couldn't help but look it up. And that's what we have here. We have zero reason to care about these two girls or this coven. This scene is screaming manufactured tension, and the existence in this sci-fi mining base of an open flame light source that is small enough to fit in your hand but has enough fuel to spread over like 100 square feet. All that is just too much, and your brain is pulled out. Like this manufactured tension with the bridges. Never mind that Soul was idiotically trying to hold up two bridges. When they fail, he catches Osha, even though the bridge appears to be nowhere near the opening he came through, and that opening didn't have any guardrails because he needed to be able to dive and grab her. I shouldn't be noticing these things, but when the scene is devoid of any emotion or investment, I'm bored and I see the obvious attempt at emotional manipulation. In episode 2, the gang needs to find Master Terriblebeard, so the temple leader takes them straight to him. No, he doesn't. The man's life is in danger, but the guide gets lost in his own temple and takes everyone the long way around, even though he could have just taken this short flight of stairs. How do I know that flight of stairs leads to Master Terriblebeard? Because that's what Osha does. She sees a plot ghost and follows it, and surprise, surprise, ends up in Terriblebeard's meditation chamber. She has just enough time to take in the corpse and the poison vial so she can have it in her hand right as the rest of the gang enters the room. Ho ho! She looks pretty guilty, huh? I wonder if she's the real killer. No, sorry, this is halfway through episode 2. They already established the twins are separate people. Characters say this out loud.
She could hardly be in your custody and committing another crime at the same time.
So, what was the point of Osha getting there first? Like, why did we need Yord to back her up, appearing from the shadows to confirm her story? Why didn't the temple guy take everyone straight to Terriblebeard? Because the script wanted some tension. That it already prevented and then immediately dismissed with Yord's dialogue. This one is really silly because we have a contrived situation to catch Osha in the act, but it isn't pursued at all, and it's already been shown that she's not the killer. What was the point of all this then? To waste some screen time. This isn't isolated. In episode 8, Osha and Darth Badboy with the soft side are flying to Brendok because the script said everyone meet at the mining fortress at 6 and be on time because they don't seat partial parties. As they are flying, Darth Latzentraps is talking to her, and she shuts off his cockpit. Apparently, his ship is a Dom and Sub model, and he sat in the one that can be remotely turned off. They wanted to show how tough and in charge she was, so they invented this ship with this special feature. Everything surrounding Terriblebeard is dumb. He has no motivation for being in a depressed meditation. He's in a room with a giant hole in the ceiling so the assassin can come and go at will. We have video game guard logic with this guy.
The challenger is near!
He looks around and I guess his AI is set to give up after a few seconds.
Must have been the wind.
This Jedi temple has locks on the front door, but has large holes in the ceiling with handholds for acrobatics, which makes the front door hacking scene more filler. Constant filler with this show. If May had a +3 hockey puck of hacking, why need the kid to distract the doorbell? Oh, so the kid can identify Osha as the killer. Even though the show is not interested in being a whodunit, but they keep acting like they were gonna do that originally. May didn't scope out the Jedi base at all. She didn't know there was a hole in the ceiling leading directly to her target. Didn't see that flying in. So her plan was to murder a Jedi in his own temple and then get out of the building. I mean, she came ready for a fight. She did the goofy hand motion. How did she see that going down? None of this matters because the script already knows that Terriblebeard was always going to drink the poison. So these questions are not important. We can contrive whatever actions we want because the outcome is all that matters. Besides, May is going to change her behavior and motivations multiple times per episode, and the script already knows that she's going to be a mind-wiped near invalid by the end of the show, so there's no point in investing too much time in her. Do you see how the end goal is all that ever matters? This is why the show is so terrible. This is worse than amateur writing. Calling this fan fiction would be insulting to fans who write their own fiction. This show knows that it wants Osha to turn to the dark side and have a dramatic showdown with her father figure, who we are shown very little bond with, and it wants to have an enemies to lovers bit because apparently there are a ton of people who wanted the Kylo and Rey thing to happen. I will not be using that stupid portmanteau. That's all that matters. In order to have those endings, we need them all to be at the same place at the same time. So the question was not, why would that happen? The question for the writers was, how do we force that to happen? Unfortunately for them, they left episode 6 with everyone in completely different places. May is on the ship with Sol, who she wants to murder. How do we get them down to the planet together? Well, first of all, May does not try to murder Sol while they are on the ship together, alone, with only the merch gopher around. The guy who she witnessed kill her mom, the guy who is at the center of her whole revenge quest.
How could you miss? He was 3 feet in front of you!
She sneaks on board with him, and he doesn't seem to be able to tell that it's her, and she doesn't throw one of her little paring knives into him. I mean, it worked on Master Trinity, but then we wouldn't have the big bleed moment, so she can't do that. She ends up getting caught, and Sol is finally ready to finish the story he's been trying to finish since episode 2, but he doesn't know. He put May in handcuffs and left her sonic screwdriver droid in her pocket, where her hand could reach it. Yeah, we've all made silly errors, you know. She frees herself and stabs him. Time for the kill. No, oh, no, I'm sorry. We have to get down to the planet. Run for the escape pod! We're hovering over the witch planet. Hovering over the witch planet? Wait a minute, did I miss something? They did the Barbie twin switch on the Wookiee planet, then they got on the ship. Why are they in orbit over the witch planet? I bet there is some throwaway line to attempt justifying it, but I'd have to watch the show again. And
I can't. Not again. I'm not strong enough.
So she jumps out there in the little ship, and you might think she wanted to lead him down to the witch planet all along, but no.
Wish this thing had a hyperdrive.
No, she really wanted to escape. Not sure why, but well, then again, why does she do anything? No one knows, and the writers don't care anymore. But regardless of her lack of motive, we want to manufacture yet more tension and have some action. Sol chases her through an asteroid belt, and he's gaining on her. Is he doing a tractor beam thing? Is he gonna ram her? Is this bumper cars? He could have shot her at any time, so it's probably not that. Well, whatever his plan was, it's foiled, because the merch gopher read the script and knows that everyone needs to meet on the planet, and it's almost 6! So he starts tearing out random wires from a wall because he, Look, they're all on the planet now! A showdown's about to happen! Lightsaber battle! Everybody look! Seriously, he was just stomping on her feet and snitching on her to Sol, but now he's concerned and sabotages the ship? Do you see how this didn't get rewrites? It genuinely feels like a different person was in charge each day, and they wrote the script front to back, and at the end of each day, they put what they wrote in a sealed box so they could never look back at it. Is this like some kind of writing performance art? Was this an experiment of some kind? Some new writing style? Are we trying to do like the opposite of Agile and Scrum and whatnot to see if it gives a cool new writing result? What is happening here? Anyway, the ship crashes hard and yet another person survives a wreck like this. Props to the team for making lightsabers lethal again, but they just substituted orbital drops as a thing you can walk off. Fortunately for May, she crashes right next to the place where everyone is meeting.
Lucky.
But we need everyone on the planet together, which means Osha and Darth BDE need to be there as well. Now, what possible reason could we give for them traveling to the witch planet? What's that? I didn't say anything. Did you say vision? That wasn't me. I heard vision. She should have a force vision that tells her where the script needs her to go. And also, let's do a callback to the witch power thing with the black eyes so it seems like we're being consistent and we planned all this.
This is the future you saw.
Think about this for a minute. One of the biggest names in entertainment, $180 million. They can't figure out how to get one character from point A to point B. So said character, who has never had force visions or prophecies or anything, who has been shown to be weak in the force, suddenly has a vision and knows exactly where to go. And it happens at just the right moment because the events that end the show take like an hour, maybe. So if this sudden vision that had no buildup had happened half a day earlier or later, even just a few hours, the show would not happen. Do you see what garbage writing this is? They were on the Wookiee planet. They left to go back to his place. The script says the ending is going to be on the witch planet, so she puts on the Cortos Ex Machina helmet and suddenly has a vision that leads her right there. The Jedi comms have not been working at all because the comms only seem to fail when Sol is going to communicate something important, but he can't. The radio transmitter must have read the script as well. So the Jedi Council can't show up on the planet until just the right moment when the comms magically come back on. May wants to kill Sol, but runs away down to the same planet instead. All of this at the same time. You seeing how forced this writing is? Are you seeing how this ending with Osha turning to the dark side and taking her father's penis away from him is the only thing that ever mattered? And the entire show has been totally contrived to make it happen, even though it makes no sense, physically or for the characters. Yes, the lightsaber is a penis, by the way. That's how the showrunner said she views it. We're getting there. It's just like, it's impossible to neatly organize a failure of this magnitude. You've got zero consideration for travel times. May kills Trinity. The next day, Timothy shows up to arrest her. How did he find her if she's a migrant? Was her ship even near the planet where Trinity got unplugged? I get that it's space travel, but when everyone warps from place to place, there's no scope, and that's important. Time just bends how the script needs it to. Before Agent K wipes May's mind, they wanted to create both tension and emotion. So they hear the Jedi party coming, following the merch gopher, so they have to hurry, but they also want a sentimental moment. The music swells, the girls are crying, we're supposed to care for some reason, but also the merch gopher's coming. Like, I seriously think this might be one big troll. Like, it's a skit, right?
Do it. Quickly. I can't lose you again. You're not. You're going to do what you're meant to do. And I won't stop you this time. I'll find you. I will. You are with me. I'm with you. Always one. One is two. You realize that? I can feel. And you do. You.
Don't move.
I guess the reason I didn't care during all this is because I didn't understand why she just couldn't go with them. Why exactly are we wiping her mind? Oh, right, we're creating tension and emotion. And the script is done with her now that she doesn't matter. Plot contrivances are the only thing driving this show forward, but those are the general ones. Sudden, out-of-character decisions, people simply knowing things they shouldn't, everyone coincidentally bumping into each other at the same time in the same place, that sort of thing. But this is Star Wars. We should look at a special section of plot contrivance involving the Force and how fickle and inconsistent it seems to be. Right out of the gate, we have Master Trinity's Force abilities suddenly failing her because the Force read the script as well and realized, whoops, you're supposed to die. She is ahead of her assassin in every way, completely outclassing her, as is to be expected, but then she takes a paring knife to the chest. How was she beaten? What kind of genius outmaneuvering did May pull off? Was this a secret Sith combat technique? It is. Sadly, Master Trinity was foiled by the ancient art of, look over there! Simply diabolical. No one's ever tried that before. Seriously, this is how a Jedi Master goes down? Can you also steal from a Jedi by pointing at a stain on their chest? No, it's right. Gut your nose, Jedi scum! Maybe that's what happened to this guy? Maybe that's why he's so evil. Plagueis being there is insane, by the way. He has seen Darth Bratwurst has exposed himself to the Jedi, alerting them that the Sith are alive. Plagueis would have cut him down for revealing himself and ruining their plans and screwing up the Rule 2 and all that. We have powers that only get used once, even though they would be a real game changer in other areas. Sol is able to force calm or force something, the prisoner guy, to get him to admit to betraying OSHA, even though he did nothing of the sort, but he never does that again. Is there a resting period? Do force powers operate on an EverQuest-style cooldown? You can only force run, force listen, and force mind read someone once a day? Some of y'all don't know how MMOs used to be. EverQuest was ridiculous. Paladin, Lay on Hands, had a cooldown that was over an hour. Mobs didn't respawn for hours. I'm not being nostalgic, by the way. It was real dumb. But obviously, that's how these force powers work. It would have saved a lot of misunderstanding with the witches if Sol had used his super force spy hearing at all during the day when he was crawling around their fortress. But I get it. You don't want to waste it. You gotta save those abilities and items for the last boss. You don't pop heroism till phase 2. Also, Sol's force grabs must not have been leveled up enough to include organic material during the flashback. He can only force pull metal, like this bridge. Probably stone, I bet. If he had grinded a few levels before the mission, he probably could have grabbed those girls. Or he should have chosen a subclass that reset 4 spell slots on a short rest or something. Learn the meta, Sol! Seriously, this group is the worst. The tank gets CC mind controlled and the healer is off doing force knows what. This is why you don't split the party when you go into a dungeon. These two are doing the worst DPS I've ever seen. This should have been a wipe. They deserved it. Speaking of wipes and video game logic, the dark side gets the better powers as usual. If you go play Knights of the Old Republic or read that book, and you should if you want a good Star Wars story, the dark side gets Force Crush, which just, well, crushes opponents' bodies. It's overpowered and extremely amazing. Anyway, in the Acolyte, the dark side gets Force Mind Wipe, and it has rather precise filter settings, like the Men in Black memory tampon. It's like Force Obliviate. So Darth Gilderoy Lockhart just waves his hand for a couple seconds, and May's memory is removed, all the way back to her starting the fire, but not her sister and vaguely Sol.
What do you remember? Fire. It destroyed my home.
Your last memory is from when you were 8 years old.
Talk about precision. Sometimes the Force will let you sense other Force users, like Immortals from the Highlander. Other times, when it's important to the script, I guess it doesn't. When Master Director Spouse gets off the ship in the last episode, she is apparently able to sense her former apprentice.
What? Toby's here?
And he can sense her as well. Not my feet!
I gotta go.
He puts the Magneto helmet on because it prevents Jedi from reading his mind, while also allowing him to expand his Force consciousness out to his surroundings. So, cortosis is one-way semi-permeable to the Force. Got it. Also, the Highlander thing doesn't work for anyone who is next to Darth Doofy in episode 2. They are right next to him, but can't sense him. Now, granted, Force sensing is rather vague across the whole IP, so I could write this off as like a Palpatine situation, hiding his powers or whatever, but as we already discussed, they didn't need to sense a dark side user to arrest the accomplice to a murder. We could explain this by saying that the Force sensing is developed through connection. Like, Master Director Spouse senses Darth Kunta Kinte because they have a history together, but no one else does, so they don't know he's a Sith. Certainly plausible. Sadly, that theory is undercut by Master Leon not being able to tell that it isn't Matilda who is leaving the forest with him, despite her being his cherished Padawan. But I feel like coworkers are around each other a lot. They would have that connection, which makes the final scene a serious problem. Master Director Spouse goes into Yoda's office to discuss the memberberry harvest that he needs the help with. She tells him they need to talk, and the season ends. First of all, woo! Mystery box! Aren't you loving that every new show and movie is artificially driven by obvious mystery boxes and not, authentically compelling plots and characters? This is the great era in entertainment. But this scene presents us with two problems. Yoda is either dumb and can't sense that she is about to lie to him, which would not be in line with what we know about him, or she tells him the truth, and he does nothing to act on a possible Sith threat, which also makes him look incompetent or part of the plan to undermine the Jedi. No matter what happens from this point forward, that character is altered in a bad way, all so they could have a 2-second key jangle right at the end. Lastly, we've got the lightsaber that is now a mood saber. They just change color, like that. Now, I haven't read any of the surrounding material regarding the saber crystals and how they turn red. From what I hear, this is not at all how it works. I'm told it's a much more difficult and drawn-out process. One has to focus and pour their tremendous amount of negative emotion into the crystal, which I guess kind of gets to know its owner. Many have noted that Anakin kills a lot of people, including kids, and his saber doesn't just flip to red. Admittedly, it is a cool concept, and I bet it would look amazing if it came at the end of a long emotional journey. But this moment is an excellent summary of the whole Acolyte experience. It's all flash with no effort. Osha has no journey, no descent into darkness, no massive amount of negative emotion that leads to this moment to make it incredible. She has a change of clothes, and she states that she can't let go of her hate for her sister. Those things happen in the final episode, by the way. This right here is everything wrong with the show. It's not earned. There's no setup, so this is not a payoff. You need to feel what the show tells you to feel. Leslye even admits it's something they wanted to do, but they knew they didn't have a ton of time to do it like the books. But she did it anyway. It's empty, shallow, instant gratification, and it means nothing. It is a complete waste of an interesting concept, so the writer could declare,
mine.
All right, you see the writing is terrible. The plot holes are enormous. Just about everything on screen is heavily contrived solely to get us to this power couple looking at the sunset. It's awful. And I could easily keep going about plot points and events that make no sense, but the more important question is, why? Why did they have to employ so much contrivance, so many plot devices? Why are there such massive holes in this story? Because these characters aren't real in any way. They have no depth, they have no motivation, they are cardboard cutouts that we never get to know, and I would argue the writers themselves don't know them. That's why every decision they make is completely at random and only to serve the predetermined plot. What's wild is that Leslye says she wasn't going for crazy ideas. She was going for character.
That's so true. And it's definitely not a new trope to have, the bad twin and the good twin, like the light twin and the dark twin, and then they switch places and then they switch back. Like, that's a pretty, I would say, reliable way of telling a thematic story, utilizing twin characters.
She understands this, and that's fine. She also said this about Darth Armday.
Well, it's interesting because of the reveal of Manny, quote unquote. It was interesting working on the show. There were several writers, cast, crew. Well, we've got to preserve the surprise. This is a big reveal here. So to me, it was not. Preserving the surprise was not very important. Like, what was important to me was preserving the character design. That was the thing that I was very concerned about getting out.
And I agree with Leslye on these points. Not everything needs to be a Shyamalan-style twist or the most original idea you've ever seen. Many shows and movies have been completely ruined by trying to do a big reveal. Also, mystery boxes, which Leslye did engage heavily in here. I'm not 100% convinced that Manny wasn't supposed to be part of the mystery. She could be claiming that because everyone saw it coming a mile away, but that's what she says, so we have to go with it. She wants to nail these characters. She's talking about being character-driven. And as we look at each part of this, notice that there are no characters. Everyone does and says what is needed just to get to the next scene. None of the emotional beats or plot points land because those characters are not developed. Their actions are meaningless because they have zero motivation. It's also why they mean nothing to the audience. We lead up to what should be a big event, like, oh no, one of the non-red shirt Jedi got killed.
Yes, very sad. Anyway.
The other reason you feel bored by these deaths is because even Leslye doesn't care about them.
So that you would get in the space as a viewer, specifically a Star Wars fan, and think, oh, they want me to care about this for several more episodes. And it's like, no, we're just going to do it now. And so he can murder these people. And so to me, it was not, preserving the surprise was not very important.
Cool. He's not actually important. The Jedi aren't important. It leads to a show where no one feels important and they have no motive. Let's start with my least favorite character in the series, friggin' Yord. This guy is just so annoying that when he died, I was relieved that he wouldn't be on screen anymore. But my feelings on Yord aside, let's look at how his behavior makes no sense. For the time that we get to see him, Yord is awkward and rigid, goofily self-assured, and strictly adherent to standard Jedi operating procedures. He's also a bit overzealous with anyone who isn't a Jedi. He smugly deals with the trade ship captain. We see him immediately suggesting shooting Kamir in episode 2 with a stun gun and dragging him in for questioning. When they send Osha in and it looks like she's compromised, Yord bursts in, lightsaber drawn, ready to strike Kamir down. He is constantly insistent that Osha not be allowed anywhere near the mission they are on with the real Jedi. When the crew is attacked on the mission to the Wookiee planet, Yord doggedly tries to stick to orders, dragging Osha to the ship.
Is only concerned with following every rule in the patrol guide. Meet more Z.
Here's the issue with Yord being aggressive and zealously following orders. It doesn't show us anything about him or the Jedi. It's very clear that the Jedi in the show are supposed to be a combination of space cops and child protective services. In any other movie or show, a young cop trying to emulate the behavior of his older, jaded colleagues would make sense and inform us about the system that young cop is working in. Movies like Training Day, Brooklyn's Finest, shows like The Shield and Southland give us young cop characters who are trying to work hard to be good rule followers, and we see them behave incorrectly because of the influence of the grizzled cops they work around. In these other productions, the young cops' actions make sense because we are also shown the corruption or negative attitudes they're surrounded with. We either see their descent into mimicking the anger or prejudice around them, or we sometimes get a slightly older character who is already acting this way, but sees the change in themselves, and we are shown how much they hate what they've become or are becoming. This is also common in war movies, pretty standard stuff, and it illustrates the corrupting influence of the system that destroys the innocence of bright-eyed new recruits. Or when my kids make inappropriate jokes, it illustrates that I am not always a good influence. So, other times they make terribly good puns, and that says I'm a good influence. Balance. But with Yord, we only see him behaving this way. Nothing about the show informs us as to why he would be so aggressive and full of himself. He has no angry mentor telling him that perps are always hiding something, they're always dangerous, especially the coloreds, which would make him pull his saber on Kamir immediately in the second episode. We are not shown extremely aggressive Jedi, so it doesn't make sense that in the same episode, when they're forming a plan to get information from Kamir, Yord suggests going in guns first, roughing the guy up, and getting the info they need. Who is he copying? What has influenced him to act this way? Nothing. Which is the problem. He is completely out of place and is only evidence of how the writers clearly see the Jedi and want you to see them even when they give you no reason. In multiple interviews, showrunner Leslye Headland talks about the hubris and lack of oversight the Jedi have at this time. There are multiple ways that could go. It is possible that the all-powerful Jedi organization would be cruel and harsh because, who's going to stop them? But it's equally plausible that they would be aloof, simply expecting everyone to cooperate and everything to go their way, because it always has, for hundreds of years, which would allow evil to sneak in. You know, like the prequels already showed. Neither of these paths is truly explored, and Yord here is one example. What I suspect really happened is that the writers think subversion is super cool, and they instinctively look at the world this way, so they assumed the audience would as well. They show Yord behaving aggressively, and the audience is supposed to assume he represents the general attitude of the Jedi at this time. You are supposed to already have information of, like, the corrupt NYPD and the pure Jedi, and you're supposed to understand this subversion. But Yord's behavior is completely isolated.
Wish you weren't so fucking awkward, bud.
I thought all of that, but it appears I'm wrong and overestimated this team. Once again, the interviews change everything. Turns out that Yord was acting on a much more base emotion. Jealousy. Daphne Keane, who played Padawan Jecki, explains that the tension between her and Yord is due to her being a prodigy and Yord being intimidated by her awesomeness. We'll come back to that in part 2 when we talk about the raging sexism behind the scenes, but the jealousy is what apparently was supposed to be fueling Yord the whole time. I'm not sure about you, but I got none of that. I thought he had a crush on Osha and was trying to be the bestest young officer on the force, but yet again, the folks involved say that there was supposed to be something on screen that simply was not there. Yord was awkward and aggressive because he was envious? Okay. What you see here is a complete lack of character motivation for Yord. Probably because he was wearing a red shirt under his robes the whole time and we just didn't know it. Why bother assigning real traits and thoughts to a guy who is just going to die in a couple episodes? He is just as much of a plot device as this stupid little badger. In reality, his only function is to exposit on whatever the writers want you to know without showing you. After the opening speech to Osha, summarizing her life, explaining things they both knew to us, he's pretty much done being useful to the story. We see the same issues with Jackie. According to Daphne Keane, she was clearly supposed to have some character, but none of it was implemented. Like Yord, Jackie has no purpose in the story. She is only there to fill time and space. Unlike Yord, she had potential, but the writers knew that she was also wearing a hidden red shirt, so they decided not to care. Jackie is Sol's new Padawan, and we know that Osha was his first Padawan. He was her father figure, and that she failed out of Jedi school. In this incredibly obvious setup, Jackie should have served as a perspective for both parties and had feelings of her own. She sees Sol pining over a hologram of Osha, showing his continued attachment to her, and asks him about it. That's it. When she meets Osha, they're completely neutral, and a few hours later, they're buddies, talking about getting drinks. In fact, during the scene where Osha says she's going to leave and only chooses to say goodbye to the random Padawan she just met, Daphne Keane said she played the scene as though Jackie had a crush on Osha. We know that the relationship between Master and Padawan is close. They spend a ton of time together, and the Padawan is usually with the Master from an early age, so developing a kind of familial relationship would be normal. If that is the case, then it would make more sense for Jackie to be jealous of Osha, not having a crush on her. And Osha would naturally be seeing Jackie as her replacement, which would also cause jealousy in any person. That tension would have shown how important the Master-Padawan bond is and inform us about Osha's closeness with Sol, which might have helped us feel something when the big betrayal moment came. Or we could be seeing a Tigress situation where Jackie is pushing herself to be the very best because her master can't get over his former student. Jackie should be trying to prove to herself that she can live up to the fantasy student of Osha that Sol has built up in his mind, and also assuring him that he's a good teacher. It's not his fault Osha failed.
Shifu loved Tai Lung like he had never loved anyone before. Or since.
She also should be a perspective for Sol, like, hey, why are you still pining over the girl from a decade ago? We're supposed to be on mission. You're training a new person. You are having attachments. You're not behaving like a Jedi. In a competently written show, Jackie would be used to reveal to us new perspective on the characters around her. She would reflect their positives and negatives. She would do something. But no, she is really just there so the characters aren't talking to themselves. Sol needs to tell the audience Osha had a twin. Does he tell the bathroom mirror? No, that would be silly. He tells Jackie, the sounding board. Osha is on the ship, and we need to know about her. Does she lament to the air around her? Nah, that would look dramatic, so she tells Jackie instead. Yord and Jackie are only filling time and space, so half the show isn't only Sol and Osha. They're a total waste, and it's amateur looking. Sure, they're gonna die, but it should mean something. Since they never had relationships, the only purpose their deaths serve is to make Khmer look brutal, which is something, but not much. And these two were on screen quite a bit for 3.5 episodes. Just for that? Just to show his brutality? In more skilled hands, these characters would have taught other characters some kind of lesson. They would have been a mirror or a lens for other characters so they could see themselves in a new way, and we could too. Look back at Iron Man 1. I'm not sure if you correctly remember how outstanding this movie was, especially because the last few years of the MCU have kind of ruined it all. Side character Yinsen was only on screen for a collective 15, 20 minutes, maybe. Yet we could argue that he is largely responsible for who Tony Stark would become.
So you're a man who has everything and nothing.
Don't waste it. Don't waste your life.
That is how you use a side character who's destined for death. We quickly establish his relationship with Tony as the guy who saved his life and is guiding him through the terrorist camp. He's got grandfatherly wisdom. He asks Tony pointed questions about the kind of life he lives and wants to live, then sacrifices himself, serving as a catalyst for Tony to dole out some righteous flamethrower vengeance. That is efficient use of side character and screen time. Or we could look at Qui-Gon Jinn. His death is the catalyst that spurs Obi-Wan to threaten quitting so he can train Anakin. Qui-Gon was important to the plot and taught the audience and other characters lessons. The Acolyte gave us these two physical paradoxes. They have mass and take up space, yet they don't matter. What also doesn't matter is Osha's reason for leaving the Jedi, or doing much of anything, come to think of it. The show opens and she is a migrant mechanic drifting from one ship to another. She is arrested and put on a prison transport. It crashes because of a prison break, and she is taken to Coruscant by Jedi. She says she's going to leave. No idea where, and the writers don't know either because they knew she was going to get scooped up by the Jedi and taken to the Wookiee planet. Then she is knocked unconscious, then is taken to Love Island by Darth Birthday Suit. Finally, in episode 8, the final episode, she decides to chase her sister down, but only after receiving a plot vision, so I'm not sure if that even counts as a full decision. The only time in this entire show that she makes a decision for herself is 10 minutes before the show ends, when she decides to kill Sol. Of course, she makes that decision without all the information because the script prevents Sol from explaining himself, but I'm just going to be generous here and say that she did something. Finally. Anything. Let that sink in for a minute. The main character of this show, the titular Acolyte, the focus of everything, every plot device and contrivance is about getting to this sunset, and she makes, at best, 1.5 decisions to affect the story. She is literally led around for the entire show. That's not a character, that's luggage. She is an actual MacGuffin. This entire show is an escort quest, and she is the NPC. What motivation does she have to do anything? Well, first of all, she barely does anything, we've already seen that, but when she finally takes action, finally kills Sol, what's her motivation? I'm talking personal motivation, like how she feels. Let's set aside for the moment the fact that Sol's crime wasn't killing the head witch, it was being a child stalker. He killed Osha's mom to prevent her from what appeared to be killing May. May being the twin that started the giant fire outside of Osha's door where she locked her in right after saying she would keep her from leaving by killing her. Also, Osha wanted to leave her mom forever anyway, but we're supposed to believe Sol's the bad guy here? Set aside all that illogic for a moment. What did we see on screen that would suggest that Osha has such a deep love and affection for Sol that the revelation that he killed her mom would cut her so deeply and rock her world so hard that she would snap and kill him? What emotion have we seen welling up in her to suggest an inner darkness seeking to break free? The only emotion we ever saw from her was guilt over a bug creature that she woke up and then it got killed. She was really broken up over that. Just kidding. She uses a bunch of them in the next episode to attack Darth Ronnie Coleman, and he slices them all up, and no one ever talks about them again. They go on the heap of plot points that only got used once. She shows next to no emotion or trauma about anything, unless you count her staring at this fire blankly while some shouting plays in the background to let us know she has a deep, dark secret relating to fire. Oh, sorry, I got the wrong clip there. Let's try this one. Okay, pretty much the same thing there. There is zero building emotion that she needs to get out and embrace, and only the dark side can let her do it. Honestly, no emotion at all. Watch this. Editing Greg is going to randomly scrub through the footage and just grab random clips of Amanda's face. You ready?
To find the Wookiee, and it was hard.
Of vulnerability.
You're the violent one. You started that fire. They've turned you against me. That's the path to the dark side.
Huh, it's the Botox. I can't show emotion for another hour and a half.
It's time to make things right.
I'm sorry I started that fire.
Plank says to build an invisible trap.
Those weren't stills. That was rolling footage. I swear, her facial acting abilities are a bust.
I will say to answer your question, so much of that was Mandala. Again, the whole theme wouldn't work if her performance wasn't how great as it is.
But there really is no rising internal conflict. Are we saying here that the dark side is just something you slip into? Honestly, it seems like putting on different clothing is what does it. Once May and Osha changed colors, their attitudes changed, and Leslye claims that she was showing Darth Bad Boy's softer side by having him put on lighter colors and wearing a hakama. That is apparently a femme-coded article of clothing, in case you weren't aware. I think the samurai would like a word on that. Anyway, the issue here is the same as anything else in this show. There's no development. The writers want something to happen, and it does. Plain and simple. Does Osha's turn to the dark side make sense? No. Does she seem super attached to Soul, so his betrayal hurts more? Not really. I mean, she was about to Irish exit at the beginning of episode 4. Just gonna head to the store for some death sticks. Be right back, kids!
It's about Master Soul.
Did you say goodbye to him?
I've caused him enough trouble.
Does she seem upset about her mother's death? Nah. We don't even get any constant exposition like Katara monologues about her dead mom and how it affected her.
The Fire Nation is ruthless. They killed my mother. I went through the same thing when I lost my mom. I lost my mother in a Fire Nation raid. Sokka and I lost our mother to the Fire Nation.
There is almost no relationship shown or implied between these two, so her motivation is that she read the script. Osha going to the dark side makes zero sense. Other than revenge against Soul, she has no larger evil motivation. She isn't shown to have evil tendencies or some great lust for power. The only thing we know about her is that she is listless, a Jedi school dropout who drifts from ship to ship as a mechanic. What is her great ambition that only the dark side is the pathway to? Just revenge and dong. Her turn to the dark side shares the same motivation as a cheating girlfriend. Her face in the end makes zero sense. She looks smug, she looks like she's trying to look powerful and strong, but why would she feel this way? What is her motivation for this face? She has none. It's like maybe a victorious face. What was her victory? She received zero direction, obviously, and the writing team didn't care because no one had any thoughts beyond, I bet this is gonna look cool. But it doesn't, because there's no reason to care about this character. Headland said she was inspired by the end of Fight Club, but those characters were obviously horrible people, one, and their motivations were completely different. That scene means something because of what we saw the characters go through. This sunset is a cheap copy. And how she rejects Soul and accepts Khmer is hilarious, especially when you know that a woman wrote this. They seriously wrote a show where some muscles and a dangling participle change a woman's mind and she goes over to the D side. She was with Khmer and awake for like 12 hours and she fell to the dark side because he's a muscly bad boy? Are we serious? This is how we're writing women? Are we sure a dude didn't do this? Are we sure this isn't like an Adam Sandler type thing where Manny Jacinto is secretly the writer and he's like, so then I strip, she sees my glorious naked body, which I've been working on pretty hard, by the way, and she's instantly smitten with me, or my character, and falls to the dark side. That would actually be believable, because some guys write female characters like that. Is this supposed to be Is this the empowerment we were sold on? Is this why it's so important that a woman be directing and writing Star Wars? I was told it's very important, and it's about time. Congratulations, ladies? I guess. But speaking of Darth Gaines...
with a Z.
Oh, I could tell.
We also get no motivation for him. I guess we are supposed to assume he's a typical Sith guy who wants power and control and is generally evil. But this show is advertised as being an exploration of the bad guys, a look through the eyes of the dark side. I know the show was short, but I did watch it, and I must have missed that part. Darth Deltoid has zero motivation, save for the implied connection to Master Director Spouse and the possible abuse and whipping she doled out to him. His only reasoning is given as a short speech about wanting to be free from Jedi control so he can wield the Force how he wants, which appears to be in kind of a murdery way, on account of the murders.
What do you want?
The freedom to wield my power the way I like, without having to answer to Jedi like you.
Leslye Headland said she wrote that from her own point of view. That's an actual self-insert speech, and she wants you to empathize with it. She feels that this speech humanizes Darth Trapezius because we all want freedom. I don't want to dwell too much on what this reveals about Leslye and her broken moral compass, because we're going to be doing that extensively in part 2, but I feel like those of us who are not clinical psychopaths can see that Darth Narcissus is the bad guy here, right? We agree that his motivations are wildly selfish. He's not the worst villain. I mean, that's a perfectly acceptable villain arc, I guess. It's not achieving the goals the show set for itself, but we at least get this guy. He wants to openly be a villain. Cool. Jacinto did kill this role, and even though they telegraphed his bumbling persona too much in the beginning, he really did an excellent job of playing that, and then a brutal, unfeeling murderer, and then a manipulative boyfriend. He and Lee Jung-jae need to see a chiropractor because they were carrying this show, and now one of them is dead, so good luck with season 2, Manny. Leslye did confirm that the fingery voyeur we see in the cave is indeed Plagueis, and he is Darth Smolder's master. This actually makes his motivation even worse. I'm getting into an area that I'm not super certain of, but Plagueis' whole thing was galactic control and harnessing the power of life and all that, right? Somebody back me up in the comments. His pupil goes on to become the Emperor of the Galaxy. Bro had big digits and big dreams. But his apprentice here just wants a companion and some hedonistic freedom?
Whoa, dream big!
That doesn't really match up. Believe it or not, though, he is the only person with even a semblance of a reason for doing what he does. Poor Master Terriblebeard here is probably the biggest victim of the lack of give a crap coming from the writer's room. He wasn't OSHA, so he doesn't matter. His only purpose was to make us think the Jedi had done something horrible, then die.
We thought we were doing the right thing.
As with the others, he's 100% a plot device. His motivations and actions make no sense whatsoever. We open on the witch planet and he is whining that he wants to go home. He hates it here, wants to go to Coruscant. For what? Who knows, viewer, he just does. Take that exposition and be happy with it. His wild pining for home leads him to jump on a speeder and race to the stronghold, filled with the same witches who mind molested him earlier. Then he catches these Wookiee hands, then he, I think that's about it. Anyway, you can see why these events would leave him so guilt-ridden that he would want to, unalive himself. That sounds kind of dumb when you say it out loud, doesn't it? And yeah, his title is dumb. The show tells us that the incident happened 16 years ago, and then tells us Master Terriblebeard has been in a trance for over 10 years. The episode 7 flashback shows him being a whiny baby Padawan who has no clue what's going on. Quick math tells us within 6 years, he went from the mewling child we saw to a Jedi Master, and then went into a guilt trance. This isn't super important and wasn't significant enough to put in the plot hole or contrivance sections. It's simply another piece of evidence that the writers couldn't be bothered to think about the details of their creation. They just didn't care at all. May is absolutely the worst of the character motivation bunch. She trains to kill the Jedi and succeeds with 2 of them. She knows her sister wanted to be a Jedi, but never checks to see if she's there? Well, once she does discover her sister is alive, suddenly her motivation goes wild. She gives up her lifelong dream of killing Jedi, tells Kamir to get bent, and is going to turn herself in. But when everything goes down with Darth OP, she no longer wants to join with them, and tries to run away. She fights Jecki, even though she was going to turn herself in. Then, she loves her sister. Then, she leaves her for dead in the forest and goes off with Sol. She wants to kill Sol, but then runs away when given the chance. Wait, no, I know why she doesn't want to kill him. I forgot. She put on white, so she's not bad anymore. That's how this works. She's on a redemption arc now.
What about the people he murdered?
What murder?
Yeah, she's a nice person now. She even cares about this other merchandising opportunity, Osha's pocket droid, Pip.
Brace yourself, Pip!
Finally, when Osha kills Sol, she's grinning like Osha won an award. Then agrees to have her mind wiped because her sister is finally doing what she was always supposed to? What, shacking up with a murderer? Not one of these characters has an inner motive and belief system that guides them. Like the folks who made this abomination, everything is just shallow and empty. With this being as plot-driven as it is and the lack of real character motivation, what you end up with is a story where no one has a journey. Obviously, none of the dead Jedi have any journey. They're props with a few lines. Trinity, Chugi, Terriblebeard, X-23, and Timothy are static. They don't change because there's no point, because they were always going to die. Now, a static character is not innately bad. Uncle Iroh is a solid example. He doesn't have much of a journey in his show. He already had one. So now he affects others. But none of these Jedi did that. Sol has no journey either. He begins the show clearly guilty over the incident and ends the show guilty over the incident. Some people might say he does learn a lesson and shows growth by accepting his castration and death.
Oh, are we playing a game where everyone says something stupid?
Apparently! And other people joined that game by saying Sol accepting his death was actually sexist, because it implied he was giving Osha permission to do something. I would say that these people are tying their brains in knots to paint Sol as the bad guy, but that would suggest more surface texture than they really have. May's story goes nowhere. She's mind-wiped at the end and adopts a slight Sling Blade accent to let you know.
They say I killed someone, but I don't remember.
Obviously no character arc there. Master Director Spouse was shifty at the start and is still shifty at the end in the same way. Darth Brachialis is evil and wants a Padawan. He does get one. That's more plot progression than character progression, but I'm tempted to count it because it's the only thing that comes close. Finally, Osha, who, according to this article, goes through a positive corruption arc. It's terrifying that someone would use those words together and not see the problem. But she didn't have an arc, not really. We already showed how she was literally led around through the show. In the beginning, she's listless. In the end, she still is. We talked about this. She has no motivation at the end. What's her next move? What does this scene tell us? The characters in Fight Club have made huge realizations about themselves and are now staring out at the world they had a hand in creating. That's what makes this scene a mockery. Osha hasn't changed, though it's tough to tell because she barely had a character to begin with, and she hasn't changed the world. Fight Club's narrator has shed his nihilistic, absurdist hero alter ego. His rational side has won out, but he is witnessing the extreme end of those philosophies. Meanwhile, Osha started selfish, stayed that way, and is looking out at a world unchanged by her selfishness. How does anyone here grow or change? Where is anyone's journey? What does anyone overcome? Which lessons are learned? There's nothing. Merely a series of events happening on screen, entirely disconnected from the people that we see, the lines we hear, and most importantly, the reality that we are all living in. Now, something you're likely noticing is the general inconsistency in tone. Like so many YouTubers, I welcomed this terribly produced manna from the TV heavens. I gathered it thrice throughout the season, and each time I did, I was struck by the whiplash in the genre and the possible audience they might be aiming for. I tried to guess over and over, who is this for? This clearly isn't for traditional Star Wars fans. They build it as a murder mystery, but it doesn't seem to fit that description. In one video, I explored the possibility of it being aimed at a casual female audience, perhaps enjoyers of the many new romance novels, smut, that have been getting popular online. In my last video on the show, I thought I'd hit upon the solution. Or, well, my wife did, but, like, we're a team, so... At my request, she tried to watch a single episode, the fourth one, and fell asleep halfway through. But before she succumbed to this televised Sandman, she said it reminded her greatly of a Disney Junior or tween show, Casey Undercover, Liv and Maddie, that sort of thing. The dialogue, the plot, the random comedic elements that get tossed in, and it seemed to fit. I talked about this after episodes 4 and 5. Now, 5 had some action and violence, and it seemed to be going for a bit of a horror movie vibe, but overall, the show continued the childish tone. Then, episode 6 exposed itself to us. Okay, so not for kids then. Back to the drawing board, I guess. Who the heck is this for? It seems the truth is that no one knows, not even Leslye Headland herself. She's very excited in recent interviews about how she was able to ship Osha and Darth Rico Suave, finally realizing the hopes and dreams of the dozens of people who wanted to see Rey and Kylo Ren together. But leading up to the show, she was saying it was a murder mystery, it was an action-packed thriller, it was philosophical, showing a new side to the Jedi. She either had no idea who her audience was, or had the ego to think she could get them all at the same time. This show has clear signs of executive interference with injections to capture target demographics and appeal to modern audiences. They want to have everything, so they can't commit to anything. Disney is so concerned with getting you excited for next product, they never finish a story. Everyone is left hanging. Tune in next time! Reva's still alive. The Titan is still sticking out of the planet from the Eternals. Everyone is Skrulls? Maybe? It's a mess. It's obvious they had no clue who to make this Star Wars show for, which I think is kind of weird because the answer should be obvious. Make it for Star Wars fans, perhaps? Look, I don't have any MBA, but it's so crazy it just might work. I am beyond tired of hearing about movies and shows targeting a part of the audience when they need to be targeting a genre. As The Acolyte was rolling out, the expansion came out for this game, Elden Ring. The company that made that, From Software, is famous for their Dark Souls series of games, which spawned its own game genre, Souls-likes they're called. FromSoft has continued to serve the audience they created, not trying to inject popular ideas in an attempt to get more players. They make Souls games, and they continue to keep trying to make better Souls games. And shock of shocks, it's working! That game I mentioned, Elden Ring, has sold over 25 million copies, their most successful game yet. So the team behind The Acolyte wanted to capture half a dozen different audiences when they already had an audience that would have given them better PR than any amount of money could buy if they only committed themselves to delivering a quality Star Wars story. That lack of tone and genre feeds into the marketing as well. This show was billed as a thriller, a mystery, but turned into something for book talk girlies in the latter third of the season. But why would they even be watching if the beginning is nothing like that? It's TV-14, but the writing depth and plot are like a kiddie show in some areas. But then there are brutal murders. But then there's Basil stomping on May's foot and she gets oil shot in her face. Pip Kelly is peeing all over everyone. And these things happen in what should be serious areas. But hey, what if we add a little comedy out of nowhere?
It's just... you get nauseous when you travel through hyperspace.
I was surprised when they said you were traveling through hyperspace. How was your stomach?
It's my head, actually.
There is a horror episode, then there's an Enemies to Lovers Beach episode. It's not just that they're trying to make a show for everyone, which is already a fool's errand. It's that they're trying to include every genre all at once, and it feels forced. The original Star Wars wasn't aiming at a specific demographic and shoving in little tidbits just for them. It simply is a story that can be enjoyed by a large audience. Now, when you bring up how bad Star Wars has gotten lately, under Disney especially, defenders love to tell you that it's just for kids. They drag out George Lucas's quote about it being for 12-year-old boys. So why are you grown-ups taking it so seriously? Oh, God. Ugh. Okay, this part gets me heated for many reasons. I'm gonna attempt to keep this brief, then we'll get back to the jokes. The people that say these things, first of all, hate children. Leslye Headland said everything in the beach episode was sexual, that everything Darth Double Entendre said is a euphemism, and he's unabashedly horny. So let's take that logic all the way, okay? Because we're talking about sexual content here for kids, for 12-year-olds. We're talking about moral relativism for kids. Let's really think about what that statement truly means and where it leads, and I don't think anybody's really gonna like it. Why would adults be making shows for kids that bend the rules of good and bad and show sexual situations? There's no other way to put it. They hate kids. There's no other explanation for why they would do these things and assume that children don't deserve quality stories. This drives me so crazy. You hear this, oh, it's just for kids, like kids are ignorant little wretches that don't deserve anything good. These stories need to be good precisely because they are for children. Where do you think kids learn? Where do you think they get empathy, morality, big ideas, self-identities, imaginations, all the other non-academic things a well-balanced person is supposed to have? Stories! Stories are how we have communicated the most important things in society for millennia. Stories are how we explore new ideas, how we examine our behaviors and our dreams. Stories are important. So it galls me when these child-hating cretins act like anyone under the age of 20 is only capable of watching bright moving pictures and clapping.
He vatored!
And now the children that were treated that way have grown up and are React streamers. Can you help me find the red saber? If you see a red saber, say red!
Red? That's red.
But the issue is compounded here, because we get told again and again, Star Wars is for kids, for 12-year-old boys. But then we get a show that tells us the good guys are creepy portable document format files, and they are wrong because, I don't know, the show implies they are wrong. Your heroes aren't heroes, boys, and the bad guys are fully justified, and they look super cool. Is this what we want future adults consuming? That's what kids are, by the way, they're future adults. There's a full fatherly rant to be had here that I will likely film at my tool bench, but for now, let's just focus on the inconsistency. Again, we ask the question, who is this for? Some of this seems to be for jaded adults who are disillusioned with their heroes and their parents, Leslye, but some of it feels like it's written for, or perhaps by, young children. In what could be yet another rant, I'll spare you from for now, this is typical of current Hollywood. When they say for adults, they don't mean thought-provoking, deep, or interesting, they mean graphic, with a sprinkling of trauma dumping and pointless deconstruction. Children do love to smash things when they get upset, so it makes sense. This show is like a child putting on daddy's suit or mommy's jewelry, and it asks you, the viewer, don't I look grown up? It genuinely feels like the sequel trilogy all over again, with each episode feeling divorced from the others. This explains why the pacing of the show is so terrible as well. The pace of a mystery thriller is different from horror, which is different from comedy, which is different from drama. This production meanders around and then suddenly lurches forward before stopping again to exposit for a while, then shoving in a fight scene and some slapstick comedy. The plot holes, contrivance, and lack of character arcs or motivation all compound each other with this complete lack of a cohesive tone. This show is a creation by committee, and it could not be more evident. The plot, actions, characters make zero sense in this idiocy. But we haven't touched too much on the dialogue itself. Sure, a lot of it is flat out exposition dumping, but what about the rest? Just as bad. This Barrel of Monkeys is a beautiful showcase of idiots and fools trying to write smart and wise dialogue. So many of these lines are pseudo-intellectual and pseudo-mystical nonsense that is meant to sound good, and to morons it probably does. In the first episode, we find Master Solansky with the younglings. He should not be here, he should be on a list, but he's giving a speech that is clearly meant to sound cool. He's a Jedi Master, revealing paradoxes of the Force to these kids. But it's actually gobbledygook.
Close your eyes. Your eyes can deceive you. We must not trust them.
Not a bad start, and we did just arrest a twin. I'm more and more convinced that they really were going to do a Shyamalan twin twist thing, that they changed their minds later, and we still have these remnants of that original idea. But if you think we're going to do anything with, like, extending your senses with the Force so you don't rely on your eyes, I'm sorry, we immediately move on.
Connect to the Force. Have faith.
I don't know what faith has to do with this. The Force is a thing they manipulate at will. These writers think it sounds mystical. And I'm not sure if they forgot who they were borrowing from. I don't think you connect to the Force. It's not Sidene or Sidar. If he starts talking about imagining yourself as a riverbank, I swear...
Think of diving into a great ocean. Give yourselves over to its weight.
Son of a bitch!
It's stillness. It's uncertainty.
It's still, yet uncertain.
Cater number one's presentation was simple, yet exhausting.
And tell me, what comes into your mind?
One kid says life comes to mind. Another kid says balance. These are the kids in Sunday school who answer every question with Jesus or the Bible. Another kid says fire, which is supposed to be foreshadowing and also makes me worry about that kid. Soul says the Force is powerful, like fire, and the ocean, my example, it's better.
It is a power we must respect.
This all sounds like it might be going somewhere, but aside from the fire foreshadowing, we have nothing here. This is a foolish writer's idea of what a sage sounds like. We just want to paint the picture of the mystical force, but we wasted a minute and a half doing it, and the episode is only 36 minutes long, so this kind of inefficiency is bad. These poor kids are in for a whole lifetime of this, it seems, because in episode 4, we get a taste of saber training.
Keep each movement tight, yet subtle.
Number 2's was subtle and provocative, like a coy Dutchwoman guarding a dark secret.
I wish I could say the Acolyte was trying to be funny here, like Mr. Haverford, but they honestly seem to think this sounds sagely.
Diminish areas of vulnerability.
Yes, when in a laser sword fight, don't get hit.
My goodness, what an idea.
Why didn't I think of that? Maximize your defenses without need to strike.
So, block? Did he just use 8 words to say block? This kind of wannabe David Carradine crap is the hallmark of bad writing. Now, it's rough when they attempt to come up with original monologues that sound vague and meaningful, but that's obviously the fallback. Their number one go-to is simply ripping off other Star Wars stuff, feeding it into a chatbot to alter it enough to pass a plagiarism check. Take the witch dog thing here. When faced with letting the girls go to the Jedi for testing, she offers this wisdom.
This test has 2 outcomes, a pass or a fail.
Cool, thanks for clearing that up and trying to sound smart. Why does this sound familiar, though?
Do or do not. There is no try.
Ah, there it is. That's not the only time Yoda's lines get pilfered, however. Mother Anastasia tells us about the thread.
All living things are connected by the same thread.
Its energy surrounds us and binds us.
A thread woven through all of existence.
You must feel the force around you. Here, between you, me.
It ties you to your destiny. It binds you to others.
The tree, the rock, everywhere. Yes, even between the land and the ship.
Cool. So we cheated and changed the words just a little. I'm not against other people having a different interpretation of the Force in this universe. I am against writers giving us the exact same ideas, worded less eloquently, and calling themselves creative. I'm also against a show padding itself with this rehashing of the same ideas, but pretending they're fresh, and then taking them absolutely nowhere. What was the point of the whole thread? Did their different understanding of the Force lead them anywhere different? Did it reveal another perspective, add anything interesting to the conversation? Or, like the rest of this show and its empty subversions, did we merely change something just to change it and pretend the act of changing is interesting in itself? Yeah, it's that one. That's one of the core problems with Hollywood today, is that everything they do only holds meaning in relation to other, better works, copying them, subverting them. Very few people there have anything to say. And this show only further proves it. Take Darth Facsimile's speech about killing Jedi and how you can't use steel or whatever, even though we just saw in that episode a Jedi die to a paring knife. A regular commenter helpfully noted to me that it was lifted straight from better material.
If you attack a Jedi with a weapon, you will fail.
If you're to succeed in combat against the best of the Jedi, you must have fear, surprise, and intimidation on your side.
Steel or laser are no threat to them.
But if any one element is lacking, it would be best for you to retreat.
An acolyte kills the dream.
You must break them before you engage them. Only then will you ensure victory.
Thought we wouldn't notice, but we did.
And we've already discussed the Darth of Rochester's speech about the freedom to do whatever he wants and how Leslye thought it was a profound insight instead of the debased rant that it really was.
So now I have to kill every single last one of you. I don't make the rules. The Jedi do. And the Jedi say I can't exist.
That's actually murder. It's one of the worst crimes of all. So also illegal.
Our last pseudo-sage wisdom came in episode 7, after this device gave his tantrum about wanting to go home. Sol explains what a Vergence is and the history of the planet. Trinity dresses him down later, explaining that she didn't tell him because he needed to learn himself. Ooh, mysterious lesson a master gives that the pupil needs to learn for themselves? Oh, wait, no, another fraud, because there is no lesson here. He isn't learning to think for himself. She implies that he needs to learn to obey her blindly. Okay, cool, good lesson for a future Jedi. Or was he supposed to simply divine that info about the planet having new life and what a Vergence is, even though he never heard of it? Yeah, upon even a moment's inspection, this all falls apart. Trinity is not wise. There is no lesson Terrible Beard could have learned. It's just a pattern the writers have seen in better material and then they copied it, not understanding it. Do you want to know how this should actually look? A book series you definitely should read is The Wheel of Time. It's clearly one of the inspirations for this show. In it, one female character is training to join a group of women called the Wise Ones, powerful women who advise, sort of direct the clans. As she is near to becoming one, they suddenly turn cold and assign her punishments for doing wrong. They won't tell her what it is because part of the culture is understanding your own wrongdoing, fixing things yourself. They give her shameful punishments like moving rocks or transferring water from one bucket to another just using her finger to move it one drop at a time. She's racking her brain trying to understand what she did wrong, but they only ever tell her she isn't learning correctly or fast enough. Finally, one day she's had enough. She marches up to them and tells them, "I'm done. The punishment is absurd, and she can't think of anything she did wrong, or at least nothing that warrants these insane punishments." Then they all laugh and hug her and explain that in order to join, she had to see herself as an equal and demand it. But you can't give someone permission to see themselves as equal. They have to see that themselves. That is a mysterious self-discovery withholding of information that makes sense. Keeping this kid in the dark, expecting him to just suddenly understand what a Force Vergence is, that's silly. It was supposed to make her look wise and mysterious, but it makes her look like a douche. The horrible dialogue isn't confined to these imbecilic writers' ideas of what a smart person sounds like, however. There are also numerous run-of-the-mill trash dialogues as well.
No one's taking me. The Jedi are bad. The Jedi are good.
Set aside that these two can't know a thing about the Jedi. This is a horrific interchange, and just one more reason why you don't do kid protagonists. They continue later.
What have you done? What have you done? What have you done?
Hey, now don't start that again.
We also get conversations like this.
I can still stop her.
With what ship? I'm taking mine.
Going where exactly? I've seen where they are.
Are we just painting her as like defiant? Is this how you show her growing a backbone or something? Okay. But that one ends with this lovely bit.
So we go together and see who gets to her first.
Let's carpool to the same place and see who gets there first. Okay. Plus, we have classic mystery box dialogue with Sol saying multiple times that he'll explain everything soon.
I didn't know Osha was a twin.
Once we get May safely to the ship, I'll explain everything. But first, you and I are going to talk.
Wow, you're definitely gonna die.
We also have complete misunderstanding of words.
Sol never blamed you. He tried to teach me to accept that someone that I love could be capable of this level of destruction.
That sounds an awful lot like blaming. Kind of like how Anastasia said,
"The thread is not a power you wield."
And then she wielded it to shove someone back. And what show for a modern audience could be complete without an attempt to force gender newspeak?
Is he or they with us?
That is not double plus good dialogue. Even some mainstream outlets are finally seeing how cringy that nonsense sounds. About time they admit it. Hey Chris, how's that make you feel? Vindicated! Me too, buddy. And of course, we have just dumb stuff, like Master Director Spouse giving the Jedi these instructions, I guess to sound authoritative.
The rest of you set up a 5-click perimeter. They couldn't have gotten far.
And then we cut to them running after the merch gopher as one big group. Like, I know that's nitpicky on its own, but it's yet another little stupid detail that no one on this job cared enough to think about. Multiple instances of that kind of thing is evidence of general sloppiness, and that doesn't happen in a vacuum. It leads to terrible productions, like this entire show. Okay, the writing is garbage in every way. glaring plot holes, contrivance upon contrivance, idiot plot, manufactured tension and emotion, cardboard cutout characters with zero motivation, dialogue and acting that make me jealous of Helen Keller, and an overall tone that shifts from episode to episode. And here's the crazy thing, I didn't cover all of it. Everything I've mentioned was just the obvious stuff that I either jotted a note about while I was watching or I remembered it later because it was just that bad. I did not rewatch this to comb for these mistakes. That's the scope of this failure. We could go deeper. We could start picking nits, but I think the point about the writing has been made. How does the show look? I did say every part of this show was a failure. How about the visuals? I'm only half kidding when I say the IRS needs to look into where the money is going, because it bears repeating. This show is reported to cost $180 million, over $20 million per episode. Here is the first town that we see. We are introducing a brand new time period, the High Republic, the golden era for the Jedi. Everything is great. So we start with this shot of the first city, which is actually a skybox. We won't be going inside of it. Everything is dirty. This set looks small. The only part of the outside we really see is this futuristic Torii gate. Then we're inside the bar. This bar is poorly lit with very little happening inside. The first look we get at this new time, this fresh canvas to tell brand new stories, holds zero visual interest. Is this actually a Gilded Age where the upper crust are living large and the bottom isn't? Don't know, that's not what the sets portray. There is nothing beyond the opening crawl text that straight tells you to differentiate this place from any other Star Wars story you've seen. We do get this PS2 wallpaper of Coruscant, this bland establishing shot. Here, let's play some footage of the prequels establishing shots. Coruscant looks vibrant and alive. We get a sense, scope of the density of this place, the seat of Jedi power. Back to Acolyte, this looks cheap, and I'm not even sure anything is moving in this shot but the camera. We get some shots inside the Jedi building, looking small and cheap here. No grandeur that would suggest the height of their power, when Leslye implies they weren't actually at their best because they had no oversight. OSHA crash lands on this soundstage with a snow effect. Got a short cave, cool. We don't see many ships, and those we do are unimaginative and boxy. Master Terriblebeard's makeup speaks for itself, and he's in a grubby city that appears small. I guess they didn't put the money into these sets. Honestly, it looks very similar to the opening city where Trinity died. Everything in this enormous galaxy kinda looks the same. Here's some of the Witch Planet mining castle rooms. Here's the CGI soundstage forest they walk through to get to the Wookiee. That forest has no sense of scope, leading to the battles feeling like they are far apart from each other and also right on top of one another as separate groups run into each other after running away. You got your CGI shingle here. I don't know, who knows, maybe they flew out for that one. Small ship interior, you get it. Nothing about this show is visually interesting. Nothing is inspiring. The locations are mostly backdrops. You could swap one for another and it wouldn't matter. The architecture says nothing about these places. There is zero environmental storytelling. We're supposedly in a franchise that tells epic space operas, and these sets and costumes are drab and dour. The only visual Leslye really cared about was the changing color of the clothing that was so obviously done, I feel like a freshman film class professor would be docking points for this kind of ham-fisted amateur crap. Look, OSHA was wearing pure white. Then, after the Parent Trap swap, she had on gray underneath the whole time. Oh, yeah. Then, she confirmingly finds an all gray outfit. Then, after her plot vision, she changes to an even darker outfit. You know, subtext is supposed to be subtle, but whatever. Okay, those are the static visuals, and they suck, but something people are talking about are the fight scenes. These are the best since the prequels, they say, which is probably true, and is also like me bragging about getting the most eggs in Easter hunt, but okay. This is the only section where I won't crap all over the show, but I'm not praising it either. I've seen some strange defense of the show, and everyone is clinging to these fights because it's the only thing to cling to. And that's pretty telling. You can tell a show is awful when everyone is trying to sound balanced, so they bring up the one non-terrible thing, and some are inflating the quality of these sequences because of that. But these fights are not good. They are passable, and only seem better than they are when compared to everything else in this calamity. The whole production is a pair of beer goggles, making you think taking these fights home is a good idea when it's questionable at best. Divorced from the show, they are average. Even within the show, they can never be elevated because they mean nothing. They aren't even epic fights between good and evil because this show and its creators don't know how to define those two words. With the exception of Soul and Darth Brutality, no one had a style. Nothing was communicated through the fights. The opening fight represents the lost potential of this show. Bringing in martial arts elements makes sense, since the Jedi are pretty much sci-fi Shaolin monks. Unfortunately, the idea wasn't carried through. It's a tacked-on influence. Reading the various interviews with Leslye, it becomes clear that the show is a collage of influence references. It is a televised Pinterest board, a shambling golem of the amalgamized ideas that Leslye thought were cool, but don't fit together. The first fight looks overly choreographed. Now, obviously, they're all choreographed, but that should be like a good drummer or a bassist. You don't notice them. You can almost see the actors thinking about it as they punch and block. May isn't aiming for Trinity, she's aiming where she should be blocked, and that makes an enormous difference. Right here is what I'm talking about. May isn't actually reaching for this saber, and Trinity blocks far too early. She isn't stopping an assailant from getting her saber, she's putting her hand where Amandala's will be in a moment. Same thing here. These two punches are not intended to land, and neither is this stab. It has no lunge. Another bad example here. May isn't trying to hit her, especially with her left hand. Trinity doesn't knock her hand away, May is already pulling it back because that's what the choreography says. This camera angle was a huge mistake because it makes it obvious that May is swinging to the side of Trinity. All the follow-up attacks that Trinity dodges are the same. Huge missed opportunity here to wear Trinity down in a natural way. When she threw the knives, I thought, oh, she's gonna make a discovery. The saber slices right through the knives, accidentally creating an impromptu fléchette weapon that the Mandalorians would eventually develop. These knives should keep moving and slice Trinity up in a few places, starting to weaken her. That was the whole thing with Mandalorians. That's why they developed slug throwers and pointy bit shotguns and flamethrowers, because the Jedi have S-tier deflect skills, so the Mandalorians were like, here, parry this, you filthy casuals. Instead, the knives drop to the floor and it looks dumb. You also notice a big red flag for fights, and that is the number of cuts. Now, they can add style if used properly, but it's almost always employed to hide bad fights. And it looks like Amandala is the culprit here. From her first strike to Trinity having a knife in her chest, it's right at 3 minutes and 30 seconds. In that time, 114 cuts happen. On average, there is a cut every 1.8 seconds. This makes TikTok videos look like art house films where we focus on a random object for 20 full seconds for dramatic effect. The fight started to say something. Trinity is so skilled, she's not even trying. Finally, she does bring out the saber, signifying she's getting a little worried. And then the fight undercuts everything by ending in the dumbest way possible, where a master Jedi can't focus on two things at once and is fooled by the old look over there offense. The fight in episode 2 between May and Soul attempts to say the same things. He's not really fighting, signifying just how outclassed she is. As we've already discussed, this fight shouldn't even be happening. They have the drop on her, she should be stunned and in custody, but whatever. So the common issue here seems to be Amandala. She's not great at this, which is ultimately the director and fight coordinator's fault, and really Leslie's fault, because she talks about Amandala like she is an acting genius.
My sister is dead!
Osha is alive.
You lie!
Uh-huh. Anyway, this isn't Amandala in the beginning, which is understandable because that's a really tough flip right there. But this also isn't Lee Jung-jae. I'm fairly certain that is a coat rack with a robe on it. These cuts do not hide any of this well. Once again, we have choreography that was practiced enough to cut together, but not enough to seem natural. He blocks too early. She isn't aiming for his head, but to the side of it, then aiming above it, then slapping in front of it, then punching in front of it. Nothing wrong with a stunt double for this kind of thing, but hers is about 6 inches shorter than her. Here's the double, not coming up to Soul's shoulders. Here she is above his jawline. Overall, this fight is clearly sped up from its original speed, which makes it feel just a bit off, but you sometimes can't put your finger on why it feels that way. We also have some editing issues, like Sol having his left foot back here, and then cutting to him facing her directly and stepping back with his left foot again. Now, what I really like about this fight is what it says about Sol. Just like the previous one, he's barely trying. Right here, he even looks a little bit distracted, which is a nice touch by Jung Jae. He's making this look effortless. Then, he appears behind her and has taken all of her knives. The entire time, he's been fighting literally with one hand behind his back. This is telling a story, which is what a good fight should do. He has a distinct style. The issue with how Mei is portrayed is that she looks reckless and uncontrolled, yet still took down Trinity and has been sent to kill Jedi. Now, on the one hand, having her outclassed in this fight makes sense and tells us about the Jedi. On the other hand, it undercuts the plot where she is a Jedi killer and later raises questions about why Khmer would send her after them, obviously not good enough, and her getting caught would expose the Sith. Plagueis should not be tolerating this. It creates lore problems. Once again, we have 40 cuts in 1 minute and 12 seconds with another average of 1.8 seconds per cut. They have to do this to hide bad fighting. Episode 5 was very fight heavy and succeeded in conveying how aggressive and violent Darth Kyle can be, but also conveyed how inept the Jedi are. This opening scene where Darth Master Chief gets a kill-tacular did not make him look strong, it made him look like he has plot armor. We can clearly see Jedi waiting their turn like video game enemies with bad AI. This guy with the green saber is deflected and then stands there while his enemy continues forward. He shoulders the 2 yellow sabers aside. One appears to be Timothy, who doesn't look that off balance, but just watches this guy, who has his back turned to Timothy, but he doesn't strike. The next yellow saber runs up to him with his saber at his side, holding it there so Darth Chun-Li can wind up and kick him in the chest, sending him flying backward. Let's watch this. He doesn't even swing. He runs up and waits for the kick. That is very bad. These two try to attack together at the same exact height, allowing him to block them both. Then, when he brings both sabers up and over, yellow guy gets deflected once and then helpfully waits a beat with a nice big wind-up so he can be deflected again. Jedi are nothing if not courteous. This continues on, and the issue with this portion is that it doesn't make Darth Plotshield look skilled or anything. It looks silly. The trees are there to hide bad choreography, there's tons of cuts. This is really bad. We do get a saber throw, and that looked extremely cool, even if the trees fell the wrong way. Now, when these two face off, it's usually pretty good. Jung Jae is not an action guy, it seems, but he sells the emotion of it with his face and his body language. This fight cuts in and out over the next few minutes, and it's fairly well done. Neither of these guys seem to be extremely aggressive, and then Darth ADD runs off because he wants to, I don't know, kill Mei, I guess. The thing that bugged me is that neither one seems to fight the same here. Sol isn't a martial arts master for a moment, and Darth Distracted is not as brutal as he was a minute ago. See, they both know dinner is on the Witch Planet tomorrow at 6. This was just a little sparring to fill some minutes of the episode. Now, Mei wants to turn herself in. Or, she did in the previous episode. I don't know. I guess not now.
John C.
I'm not afraid to reuse a joke, and this whole fight is a joke anyway. She has murdered 2 Jedi and came here for a 3rd. For all Jecki knows, she's working with the super killer outside. But X-23 forgot what movie she was in and tries to flail her arms at Mei and claw at her. Does she not have a lightsaber? In this timeline, are they not about cutting off hands yet? Because George was all about cutting off hands. This fight is absolutely terrible because it makes 0 sense. X-23 is reading Miranda rights before she has both cuffs on? Why? You already know, because the script said to. Thankfully, it ends and Mouse 23 is attacked by Darth Feline, who toys with her for a bit. Now, according to this article, Daphne Keane said this scene was supposed to convey what a skilled prodigy Padawan Jecki was, but it didn't. It looked like she was fighting for her life, and it also looked like Darth Dad was letting her have some ground to give her a confidence boost. He even turns off his saber while she's on the ground, allowing her to get back up and try again. Come on, Slugger, you got this. But then we get the dual saber moment, which is cool, no matter what. My only complaint here is this MCU face. This grin, like she just found a new toy to play with, that face irritated me. You're about to die, and you found an advantage. You can talk about your boomstick if you're being campy, but this show is taking itself far too seriously for that. However, we get some dual saber action, which she is suddenly good at, and yes, it makes zero sense, and also no, I don't really care, because it's cool. I give points for cool. He's so obsessed with May, however, that he leaves yet another fight to chase her. This guy knows how long the episode is, and he can't end things too quickly. Here, X-23 has to aim high, and it looks dumb. They do such a terrible job of putting Darth Teflon against multiple enemies. They refuse to kill him, like Soul kicking him right here. As he delivers the kick, his saber almost accidentally hits the guy's hand. This kind of thing just sucks the tension right out of the fight. Him fending off 2 Jedi, one of which is supposedly a prodigy, with his one saber is silly looking. When Dooku has to do it, he separates his foes. When Maul has to do it, he's got a double saber. Do lightsaber fights look cool? Heck yes they do. But they still also have to make some sense. And you can't adjust the skill levels and intelligence of the fighters on the fly just to get what you want out of the battle. Jecki and Yor do die in this battle in the 5th episode, and I do have to give Disney props for going there. If this show were even passably written, that would have upped the stakes. It isn't, so it doesn't, but I still like the trend, and I hope it continues. The fight between Chugi, Squid Game, and Padawambulance in episode 7 is uninteresting. Same issues as before, the blocking is bad, it's overly choreographed, and there's no reason to care about any of these people. We don't know Chugi or Padawambulance. Admittedly, I think I'm in the minority on this one, but the idea of a Wookiee Jedi isn't that interesting to me. I mean, it's a cool idea, but I saw people talking about this fight being so amazing because we finally saw a Wookiee with a lightsaber! Oh my god! I don't find that concept interesting enough on its own to care about this lazy fight. Finally, we have the big finales. The 2 fights in episode 8 are supposed to be a huge deal. Soul and Darth's stepdad are fighting for who will be there for Osha, because no one cares about May, not even the writers. You can tell the folks involved wanted this to be the big showdown. It's not a terrible fight, but it lacks all emotional impact because these guys are fighting for the soul of a person who doesn't seem to be wavering. There isn't much at stake here because the character of Osha is meaningless. But as I said, this is a fun fight. These guys are showing really good aggression, especially Soul, who is having a breakdown and showing it well. Later, as he starts to lose, Darth I'm Out of Names gets more reckless, showing his worry. We've got good use of environment, like this walkway that Soul is forced to jump out of. Honestly, this was the only really stupid part of the fight. As I said at the beginning of this section, this show is trying to pay homage to a bunch of different influences, but it's jarring to have a laser sword fight suddenly have Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon bits, where Soul does this stylized flyback thing. He also hangs in the air for a moment for this multi-kick. If you want to have a martial arts master Jedi, that's cool. More than cool, honestly. That sounds incredible. If somebody made a Star Wars story that was basically Kung Fu from the 70s, that would be fantastic. However, when you tack it on for a couple of seconds, it's jarring because it feels completely out of place. At the end, Kamir is beaten, and props to Manny Jacinto for still looking intimidating while a lightsaber is pointed at his face. Hey, Amandla, that is how you act with your face. However, the fight is being juxtaposed with another fight between Amandla and Amandla. I was having horrible flashbacks to last summer when I saw The Flash and got twice the Ezra Miller. This cutting back and forth between these fights makes zero sense. Typically, that kind of juxtaposition with 2 scenes should compare them somehow. There is some sort of parallel happening, or they signify the same thing or opposite things. An extremely famous example is the baptism murder scene from The Godfather. Michael Corleone is attending a baptism for his nephew. We have a peaceful church, organs, got a priest asking about renouncing Satan. Interspersed are the multiple assassinations happening across the city on Michael's orders. This illustrates the duality and hypocrisy of his character. That's probably an unfair example because it's so excellent. So another example from not a classic film is the diva song / fight in The Fifth Element. Here we have Bruce Willis's Corbin Dallas attending an opera on a spaceship, and as the diva is singing, we cut back and forth to Mila Jovovich's Lilu beating up bad guys to protect some powerful artifacts. As the song intensifies, so does the fighting. As the singer begins to dance, so too does Leslye's movements become dance-like, and the whole thing ends with both of them taking a bow. We have the same rising tone through both scenes, and it signifies that Leslye is a pro, just like the singer. This fight was not great. However, still a fun movie. The back and forth in The Acolyte means nothing. You might try to say that both fights parallel a struggle between light and dark, but the show's creator already said she was aiming for gray, and neither of the twins represent a side. They are both selfish. This feels like a freshman film student who heard juxtaposition was meaningful, and so smashed two random scenes together because that's what great filmmakers do, right? The other issue with the twin fight is, first of all, that Amandla is bad at it, so it's twice as terrible as her other fights. Her jerky movements and clear focus on each memorized move, not the overall fight, are still here, but twice. But more than that, it makes no sense in the show. How does Osha know these moves? She hasn't had this training in years. What they were attempting to convey was how these two are the same person. But since they never expanded on that idea in the show, and since there is no precedent for them thinking the same things or behaving the same way, this identical fighting style looks silly. There you have it. This show failed in every way a show could fail. Bad writing, bad directing, bad acting, bad visuals. There is an excellent reason the show is so awful, and that's because the person that made it is an awful human who refuses to do her job. I appreciate you hanging out with me as we examine this masterclass in horrible television, and I hope that you join me next time when we examine, in detail, the warped mind behind this atrocity and how she is obsessed with intersectional thinking, sex, and has no understanding of morality or how to present challenging moral questions. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you next time.